O'Kane?
We're really honored tonight to have our very own County Council member, Rod Dembowski, here to swear us in. And Rod, I think you've got all of the papers you need, and I know you want to say a few words, so please.
I do. Can I approach?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the honor of the invitation to join you tonight for this very special convening of the brand new Kenmore City Council. They look pretty good, don't they? I mean, how about a round of applause for that new council? Take it. That might be the last one you get all year, right? I did this a couple years ago, and it was a real pleasure and an honor, and I'm very, very proud of our partnership between King County and the City of Kenmore, and between us as elected leaders in the community to accomplish great things for our shared representatives. I thought I might just hit a couple of highlights, then brag on each of you, then swear you in. Do we have time for that?
Sure we do.
All right. The county is a partner with the City of Kenmore, and I'm proud to be an advocate for that partnership. And I thought I might just hit a couple of highlights. One, in terms of some dollars invested, we recently, in the last budget supplemental we just did, I was able to secure in our clean water money, our waterworks grants, $50,000 for Swamp Creek work. And I know new Councilmember O'Kane has been a great leader on environmental work, and was out there just last weekend, the weekend before, with volunteers, and I'm excited to see what that money can do. Along with many of you, including with the leadership of Councilmember Herbig, you know that we, a couple years ago, successfully opened Mary's Place Family Shelter in our vacant Kenmore Police Precinct. The city was amazing in terms of working with the county on zoning for that. And Mary's Place, we had a town hall meeting where there was some concerns. Naturally, those were laid, and I think most people would say they've been a great neighbor, and we've continued to jointly invest in them. Just this summer, we were able to bring $13,000 of county money for a brand new playground in the back empty lot. So if you've seen that new play structure back there, we were there, Mayor Baker and I slid down the slide together. It was a fun day. The kids loved them. And just an example of our partnership. We've done some youth sports investments, obviously $600,000, which I think we're putting to use for the Waterfront Activity Center when the project over at St. Ed's slowed down. We've dedicated money for affordable housing, millions of dollars for the North End. And it's, of course, a pleasure to partner with you on transit issues. Obviously, Kenmore is on a key transit corridor, the 522. We have park and ride lots. And more growth is coming with respect to transit and sound transit and changes there. And so I just look forward to continue to partner with you on that. We've had a tremendously successful partnership with our sheriff's office. Obviously, they're on a contract basis with the City of Kenmore. And I think we are leading in progressive and contemporary ways in supporting public safety. We worked with all the North End police departments, including in Kenmore, to bring forward our Radar Navigator program. We took over $600,000, maybe $700,000 almost in mental illness and drug dependency dollars, 10th of a penny sales tax, invested in that to have partners with police officers when someone's experiencing a behavioral health challenge, mental health, chemical dependency, or any number of the social challenges that law enforcement traditionally haven't been trained to handle. We are partnering a caseworker, right, a social services worker with the officer to get them connected to resources they needed. And that's becoming a real model. We had a conference up at the Linwood Conference Center a couple of months ago where police departments all over the region came to learn about that. So that is pretty exciting. We had a big win with our shared North Shore Senior Center. The voters of the district, some of us serve on the North Shore Park and Rec Service Area, approved by 80%, a little tax, 4 cents per thousand, to invest in the facility there. And that will also help the branch here in Kenmore as well. But I thought that was a credit to our community when they said, you put forth a plan, you showed the need, you said what you're going to spend it on, and we said yes. The community said yes, much like the walkways and waterways work that you have done as a city council to build sidewalks and connect this community to the lake. I'm excited as we look forward to continue working with you for increased transportation and transit options. The Ferry is of great interest. I put some language in our budget a couple of years ago to do a study. It showed that the Kenmore to Seattle route, wherever you'd connect there, was the most viable of about 50 options they looked at. We have continued to look at that with some additional work, and we'll have a report in July. I know a number of you are interested in that. Mayor Baker has been just a strong champion for that for a long time, and a lot of credit to him for bringing that forward. So there's just a few highlights of our general partnership, and I just can't tell you what a pleasure it is to work with each of you. Now, if you'll indulge me, maybe a few words about each of the 4 members who are being sworn in tonight, because it's easier for me to brag on you than you to brag on yourself. I'll start with Mayor Baker, and a very serious question. I'm not sure, and if anyone knows, let me know, if there is anyone in America, other than Mayor Baker, who loves their city more than this guy right here. In my 7 years now on the county council, there has been no stronger champion in the region for a city that I have seen than Mayor Dave Baker has been for Kenmore, and it has paid all kinds of results, from tens of millions of dollars of state and federal investment into your transportation to investments in your water quality, your environmental, your housing. Kenmore, to literally to getting Kenmore's name on the I-5 signs, right? So you know we're here. Mayor Baker has been a leader, going to Olympia, coming to the county, working with city partners throughout the region, and it's a very impressive track record. And in addition, he's just a nice guy. Mayor Baker, I don't know that it's a secret, but maybe some have forgotten, applied for the job that I have when it was open. And in politics, sometimes that creates enemies or competitors. And I can't tell you, it would be hard for me to say that there's a better friend that I've had in this business in the last 7 years than Mayor Baker, and I'm deeply appreciative of all that you do for Kenmore, your friendship to me, and your partnership. You are a credit to the community, and I'm really proud to know you.
Thank
David,
you.
looking forward to swearing you in a minute. Councilmember Milt Curtis, Dr. Curtis, was first elected in 2007 to the city council. Is he your senior member now? Does he beat you, David? No?
No, David's longer.
Okay, you still got him.
Yeah.
Do you hold that over him?
No.
Okay.
No.
I did have the honor to swear in Dr. Curtis 4 years ago, right over there, and it's been a pleasure to work with him in those years since. He has been married for 45 years. He's got 2 children, 9 grandchildren. I don't even know how that is possible, and he's lived in Kenmore for more than 28 years. He has had a very storied career as a family medicine doctor for 35 years, including being the medical director for Evergreen Hospital Primary Care. And I understand, Dr. Curtis, that you've delivered over 1,000 babies. Is that true? That is true. Well, that's good training for politics. And I'm sure that you'll be able to handle in your current term anything that comes your way. And I know that you're transitioning now to a more of a senior care practice, which is becoming a very strong and growing need, along with David Baker, who's been a big advocate on senior issues. That's something I hear more and more about. And in fact, we added it as a bucket to our veterans seniors now in human services levy. And it has become quite popular, where we're investing in all kinds of senior care. Congratulations on being reelected, and thank you for willing to serve another 4 years. Dr. Curtis. Then we got 2 brand spanking new council members. And the first is Councilmember Karina File. Now, Karina, many of you probably know, has lived in Kenmore for more than 30 years, 3 decades, where you raised your children, Jonathan and Skylar. They both attended the North Shore School District, where you were very active. And your resume, of course, already reads like a veteran elected leader. You've served on the Kenmore Census Committee, the North Shore School District Nutrition and Fitness Advisory Committee, the Kenmore Community Garden Committee, and the Washington State PTA Board, just to name a few of the many organizations and entities that you've served with. You've donated countless hours of volunteer time to various nonprofits in Kenmore, and in the process have become an incredible policy wonk. I've seen you demonstrate those chops on many occasions. One of which was in 2018, when, along with folks at Tobacco Free Kids, you came down to meet with me to help advocate for raising the age of sale of tobacco in our state to 21, something that you were ultimately successful upon and took effect on January 1st. So congratulations on that leadership, and I'm really looking forward to working with you, Councilmember File, in your new role. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I should also note that you've also been a tremendous leader on LGBTQ issues. And while I wasn't able to attend, I was very proud to see you leading the effort to raise, I believe for the first time, the pride flag here out on the plaza earlier this year. So congratulations on that, and thank you. Finally, Councilmember Melanie O'Kane. Melanie, you grew up in the city of Kenmore. You attended Arrowhead Elementary, right over here, just up from Arrowhead Point, North Shore Junior High, and you graduated from Inglemore. And like many UW Huskies, you stuck around Seattle until your hometown called you back. You came back to Kenmore, were struck by how friendly and supportive our neighbors are here, and a group of them even greeted you in your new home with champagne, flowers, and put on an ice cream social for your kids. That is the spirit of Kenmore, and doesn't happen so often down in Seattle, I'll tell you that. Your neighbors and the community that you built encouraged and supported your run for city council, and here you are today. I have been particularly impressed with your interest in and leadership on environmental stewardship issues, on the ground volunteer recruitment, really investing in the special treasures of Kenmore. We are on the water, right? The urban creeks that are here, the forest lands, the things that really in the natural environment make this such a special community in which everyone treasures. And I'm really looking forward to working with you on those and other issues, and I congratulate you on your election to the Kenmore City Council. Now, I thought I would bring a little gift for the 4 folks being sworn in. And like grade school at Valentine's Day, if you're going to bring something for one, you got to bring something for everyone. So I brought a little gift, which is under the gift limits, counselor. We're following law. And this is just a little survival kit for each of you. And the first item in them is green energy tea, because in this job, you got to have a lot of energy, and green tea is healthy. So I'm not much of a tea drinker, more of a coffee drinker, but to be honest with you, at the outlet, the tea was $1.99 and the coffee was $4.99, so you got tea. All right? Then, politics can be mean, it can be tough sometimes. Maybe a little more kindness. There is a kind bar in your package for each of you, something we could all practice. One thing that I've found gets one through the day, chocolate, right? On the dais, in a retreat, at a meeting, little chocolate, touch of caffeine, touch of sugar, just keeps you going, makes life a little nicer. If you're going to be shaking a lot of hands, you're going to be kissing a lot of babies, hand sanitizer. All right? We got to fight those germs off. We need you healthy, and we don't want the babies sick. And when all of that fails, and you get the headache and you get the pains, little pain relief. All right? We got some pain relief for all of you. So there is a survival kit for 2020 for the Kenmore City Council, and we have one of these for each of you. All right? Now, who wants to be sworn in? We'll start with, who would like to go first? Karina? Why don't you lead us off? I think we're going to go over here to the flag.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. Raise your right hand.
I,
State your name.
Priya File,
Very good. You passed the first test. Having been duly elected to the office of
having been duly elected to the office of
City of Kenmore Council Position Number 7,
City of Kenmore Council Position Number 7,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of this office
discharge the duties of this office
as prescribed by law
as prescribed by law
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my ability.
And to the best of my ability, and that I will support and maintain the Constitution
And that I will support and maintain the Constitution
of the State of Washington
of the State of Washington
and of the United States of America.
and of the United States of America.
Congratulations, Council Member.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember O'Kane, would you like to go next? I'll try and do it a little more smoothly. raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Melanie O'Kane,
Having been duly elected to the office of
having been duly elected
the City of Kenmore Council position number 4, solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully
discharge the duties of this office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability,
and to the best of my ability
and I will support and maintain
that I will
constitutions of the state of Washington. Congratulations, Councilmember O'Kane. All right, Dr. Curtis, are you ready? How many times have you read this? Who's this for? I state your name.
I, Milton Curtis,
Having been duly elected to the office of
having been duly elected to the office of
City of Kenmore Council position number 3,
City of Kenmore Council Position Number 3,
solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially
do solemnly
discharge the duties of this office
discharge the duties of this office
as prescribed by law,
as prescribed by law,
to the best of my ability,
and to the best of my ability,
that I will support and maintain
that I will support
the Constitution of the State of Washington
the State of Washington
and the United States of America.
and the United States of America.
Congratulations. Councilman Curtis. Awesome. Okay, Mayor Baker, you last. But not least.
Last but not least.
Raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, David Baker,
Having been duly elected to the office of
having been duly elected to the office of
City of Kenmore Council position number 5,
City of Kenmore Council Position Number 5,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of this office
discharge the duties of this office
as prescribed by law
as prescribed by law
and to the best of my ability,
and to the best of my ability,
that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the constitutions of
the constitutions of
the State of Washington
the State of Washington
and the United States of America.
and the United States of America.
Congratulations, Mayor Baker. Okay, then should we get yours?
Perfect.
Can we do one picture with all four of the swearing in? Is that a word?
Come on.
One more with this phone? Do you mind?
Oh, here.
I gotta throw you on the face, Rob.
Thank you.
You like the Frankie movie one.
Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall, Dr. Curtis. These were all purchased in Kenmore. Local sales tax was generated, except on the groceries and the medicine. There you go. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. And thank you for everything you do for the city, because you do a lot. All right, if you will please stand and join us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance All right, next item on the agenda is the election of the mayor and the deputy mayor. And the chair will seek nominations for mayor at this time. Councilmember Curtis.
I would like to nominate David Baker for the position of mayor.
Is there any other nominations? Is there any other nominations? Is there any other nominations? Seeing none, I declare the nominations for mayor closed. I guess we go for a voice vote now.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Srebnick,
Yes.
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Where's the public comment?
Thank you.
Public comment always comes before this kind of business. You can have one.
All right, next item on the agenda is the election of the deputy mayor. And I declare the nominations open.
I'd like to nominate Nigel Hairbud.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? I declare the nominations closed. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Curtis,
Yes.
Councilmember Srebnick,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I'll second. And the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you and the community. We ask you please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and to help you, there's a timer on the screen behind us. Clerk, please call the first person.
Aaron Cole,
Hi, everyone. I am here tonight just to comment on the St. Edward's State Park ball field proposal. I am a teacher at Camp Roots, and so I am here not in favor of the ballpark. I am, our program, which is based out of St. Edward's, sorry, I'm really nervous. The philosophy of Camp Roots is based on mindfulness, stewardship, and connection. And I'm here tonight to speak specifically to the philosophy of stewardship, or the job of taking care of things. So one of the things that we do at St. Edward State Park at the Camp Roots program is that we teach kids that it is their job to be stewards of the earth and of the natural environment. And at the park, I teach 1- and 2-year-olds, so you can imagine what stewardship looks like to them as opposed to some of the older kids. truly, for them, it's more, don't squish things. Use one finger. Try to keep everything alive out there. And that's really kind of what we're trying to do with the wetland. We're trying not to squish things. We're trying to keep everything alive out there. And it really feels like if we move forward with this project and this beautiful resource we have, that we are going to be doing a lot of squishing of things. I don't know how aware you are of how alive soil is, for example, and we are going to, I've got a minute and a half left, right? Sorry. I don't know if you're aware of what happens to dirt when you dig 8 to 10 inches down and you put in silica, but soil is a living thing, and we're going to cause a massive die-off of bacteria, fungi, algae, protozoa, nematoids, earthworms, insects. The dirt underneath anything that we put in, astroturf, or even grass that we grow that has a lot of chemicals in it, is really going to be a big giant dead space in the middle of this beautiful park that we value so much for being so alive. So I keep hearing this ball field is really only going to be 1% of the entire park of a whole. And I want to reframe that thinking just a little bit and just point out that we only have 2 wetlands at the entire park. I've never even seen the other one. I don't know where it is. We found it on a map the other day, and I'm gonna bang around a little bit in the forest and try to find it, but we only have 2. So hopefully that reframes the way you think about the space at hand. And I also hear a lot of talk about how great it's going to be to have a buffer zone put in that's been redone, but science shows again and again that the size of a buffer zone really matters. And I don't know if you were aware of how quickly a small buffer zone can degrade, but it's very quick. Smaller spaces don't hold up as well to human activity as much as bigger spaces do. So just something to think about when you're moving forward in this process. Thanks so much for listening to me.
Thank you.
Tracy
Very much.
Bonashinsky.
Tracy Bonashinsky, Kenmore. Prior to its acquisition in 1977 by Washington State Parks and Recreation, the land that is now St. Edward's State Park was owned and developed by the Archdiocese of Seattle as a seminary. As part of the development that happened in the 1930s, the seminarians cleared, filled, and leveled a portion of the wetland west of the seminary for ball field use. They did this because they did not have the knowledge we do today about the importance of wetlands to a healthy watershed, healthy buffers to healthy wetlands, and a host of other issues related to the environment and climate. They were living through a period where land was largely viewed by Americans as something to dominate and engineer to fit human desires, rather than as a network of living systems with which to work in harmony to meet human needs. We're still not where we need to be on that one. Here's the good news, though. Ball field is a land use, not a feature of the natural landscape, and we are not locked into poor land use decisions. Indeed, the number of organized sports events happening on that land has dwindled over the past decade and a half to cricket and cross country because it is not well suited for ball field use. This is not a fault of the land or something to work against. Most of it is not officially designated as wetland now because of the destructive actions of the seminarians, but it remains an important part of the wetland ecosystem. It is considered the contributing basin to the wetland and includes the wetland buffer. It is saturated for a good portion of the year because it is doing critically important work for us, including filtering sediments and other pollutants from stormwater runoff, slowing floodwaters, reducing erosion, and storing carbon. There's more good news. We don't need to spend upwards of $300,000 on EIS studies to tell us that spending $5 to $7 million or more to degrade and destroy a natural open space with important environmental and climate functions is not the right decision for the long-term health and sustainability of our communities. We have access to the wisdom of indigenous peoples who have been on this land since time immemorial, and we have access to already existing scientific knowledge about wetlands, wetland buffers, watershed health, stormwater runoff, microplastics, carbon banking, soil health, habit connectivity, biodiversity, and more. It would be an irresponsible use of funds to authorize studies that tell us what we already know. This isn't the right place for the City of Kenmore's proposed development. Our climate is collapsing. It's not happening only in far-off places like Australia and the Arctic. It's happening here. Kenmore is not immune to from the harmful effects of a rapidly warming planet, and we can ill afford to continue down the path of dominating and engineering the natural environment to suit our desires. This is what this development is. It would use environmentally sensitive land to fulfill a want rather than a basic human need. We do this at our peril. Please do not move forward with this development. Please be the visionary leaders that Kenmore needs as we move into an ever more uncertain climate future. I leave you with a quote from Oren Lyons, a faith keeper from the Onondaga Nation. The peacemaker taught us about the 7 generations. He said, when you sit in council for the welfare of the people, you must think not of yourself or your family, not even of your generation. He said, make your decisions on behalf of the 7 generations coming so that they may enjoy what you have today. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you and for your serious consideration.
Thank you.
Oh, I've got it. Patrick O'Brien, but I believe he's left. Patrick O'Brien. Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, congratulations. Happy New Year. Elizabeth Mooney, 5934 Northeast 201st Street, Kenmore. I'm here to give you one of these. It is to follow up on PERC, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore's working within the Cities for the Love of Kenmore project. And we had a really happy time. Thank you, Rob Carlinzi, and lots of other people for coming to help on October 30th with Sammy the Salmon and Tom Murdoch from Adopt a Stream. It was a good launch, and so we are continuing it. The purpose is PERC's Environmental Science Talks. It hopefully will be semi-monthly, and on January 30th, we will be having Dr. Richard Honor from the precautionary group come to speak to us about water, toxins, adverse consequences on human environmental health, and sewage, biosolids. Please come and please spread the word. The hope is that we will get people who want to make a difference from the elementary schools all the way, especially the high school. Aditi Jain, I hope, will come. I communicated with her tonight. She just couldn't make the meeting. But we want to follow up on the work that they're doing, and that climate change summit, and that will get people in action committees. So hopefully we'll start with this talk with Richard Honor, we'll get people here, and then we'll follow up at some of the businesses to have conversations and form committees. So whether we go from here over to maybe one of the breweries, it'll start at 7 p.m., end at 8, and the Cairn has said at least that they might be interested in having a few people go over there. If you have ideas about where we could go afterwards, that would be great, because I know the hangar closes at 8. So I'm going to give you a copy of this. Please share it. And I think succinctly, I just want to support the first 2 people that spoke. And from having gone down to Lacey years ago about this St. Edward Park proposed artificial turf with artificial light and bleachers, I just would hope that you as a new council will direct our staff to stop spending our money on what I believe sincerely is a ludicrous idea to put that on a wetland which has a stream that goes down to Lake Washington. We could promote kokanee restoration at that stream, and so hopefully you'll take that off their agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney.
Phyllis Finley.
Give it to the clerk. Give it to the clerk, yes.
Thank you.
Phyllis Finley, Kenmore. The proposed plan should not be considered in its final form as presented tonight by the Planning Commission and staff. There have been at least 4 messages to you regarding citizen priorities: the Imagine Kenmore Initiative, Walkways and Waterways Bond Survey, Kenmore Parks and Recreation Survey, and the Pros Plan Survey and Open House. None of these surveys and studies identify a multi-use athletic field as a priority for residents. What have been identified as priorities are: number 1, nature trails; number 2, paved walking, biking paths; 3, natural areas and reserves; and 4, an indoor swimming pool, an aquatic center. Not necessarily in those orders. The city's pursuit of a multi-use sports complex at St. Ed's is in direct opposition to citizen priorities. Not only does the proposed development at St. Ed's directly conflict with clearly established priorities, but if constructed, it will displace the very natural amenities that residents already enjoy and say they most seek. Accordingly, I request removal of the St. Ed's Ball Field Development Plan from the pros plan as outlined in the petition given to you on January 3rd, and ask that you consider the following 6 points. Number 1, in general, the pros document needs to resolve discrepancies so that the public and the planners are aware of the conflict between citizen priorities and citizen planning and spending. Number 2, it's incorrect that the city of Kenmore needs to supply fields for any private sports league. There is no such requirement. The more fiscally responsible approach, and that used by other cities, is to work cooperatively with the school district. This approach has not been exhausted by Kenmore. It appears it has never gone beyond the preliminary stage to really a real analysis. Number 3, in addition to using school fields, Kenmore should work cooperatively with nearby communities for serving needs. Being a small city of slightly more than 6 square miles, it's not an undue burden to travel to a neighboring community for a game or a practice. The rest of us do it all the time, don't we? We go to a movie, a theater, a hardware store, a swimming pool. The draft needs to reflect this. Number 4, speaking of swimming pools, that is a higher taxpayer priority than the sports complex. The expenditure of that money would be, of the $7 million, would be more closely aligned with citizen priorities. Number 5, the draft has completely omitted the various current environmental uses of the field at St. Edward's State Park, including camp routes and the Wilderness Awareness School, although there is a lengthy description of youth sports leagues in the plan. The draft needs to be corrected to balance the information regarding the various uses of the park. Finally, number 6, the draft supports the activities that a multi-use development at St. Ed's would provide. But highly developed sports complexes are not the only venue in which to engage in an active and healthy lifestyle. The draft pros plan omits this conflict with the city's goal of conservation and open space and needs to be corrected. Before endorsing the pros plan as written, please take the time to make the necessary changes to ensure its accuracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finley.
Peter Lance.
I'm here to talk about gambling tonight, and it's the gambling the council is currently considering with this sports field proposal up at St. Edward State Park. We have no idea really if the ball field as proposed can be digested along with the Daniels Lodge proposal that's undergoing right now. There was an extensive EIS study and traffic studies that went forward for that lodge. During the challenge to the EIS, the hearing examiner found great controversy in the parking and traffic studies that were presented. As a result, he required that after this lodge is put in place, that there be follow-up studies to see if the traffic studies were even viable. We don't know if Daniels is going to be able to live up to his promises. And this park is your park. It is Kenmore's park, really, in reality. It just happens to be owned by the state. But this is our park, and why would we gamble putting a ball field in there at this point when we don't even know if we can digest the magnificent large lodge that's going to go in there? We have a real risk of having a conflict of two large traffic intensive activities going on at the same time. And to gamble even EIS money at this point is money ill spent. We don't know that Daniels Lodge is not going to overwhelm that park on top of everyday users. Why are you considering spending this money when we don't even know if the park commissioners who take a jaundiced view of the traffic studies that have been presented so far? They view them as speculative. I don't even know that if you presented them with your traffic studies today and a positive EIS in every sense, that they would accept a ball field proposal, even if you're going to present it to them on a silver platter, until the Daniels Lodge has been vetted and proven in real life, real time, because all the traffic studies to this point and parking are speculative. It's the nature of the beast. And you guys can pay for and you will get traffic and parking studies that are going to tell you there will be no conflict and it can all be mitigated. But that is a gamble. It is speculative. It's like the weather forecast. You don't really know what's going to happen, and you guys are gambling with taxpayer money at this point. I would strongly suggest you shelve this project until the Daniels Lodge is up and running full bore, and you can see that if your park can accommodate another high-intensity activity, because there will be 8 ball teams coming and going at different times, at the same time, while the lodge will potentially be inviting guests in to have dinners, people coming in to stay at the hotel. This is a gamble that is unacceptable.
Mr. Lance, we're at 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Good wrap up.
Okay.
Thanks.
And
Thank you,
we've
Mr. Lance.
outlawed gambling.
Thank you.
Vicki Grayland?
I'm Vicki Grayland, and I live in Kenmore. First of all, I want to say congratulations to our new city council members. And I'd like to take a moment to honor the memory of Ann Hurst, a longtime Kenmore resident who died last month. She was a fierce warrior for the environment. She did everything with grace and intelligence, and I was very lucky to know her, and I learned a lot from her. About St. Edward's, which was her passion, I'd like to say I still think it's fiscally and environmentally irresponsible to go ahead with the overdevelopment of what was originally supposed to be a passive use park. If we look through the lens of climate change, climate crisis, we need to preserve every wetland we have and every piece of natural soil that we have. It's one of our best hedges against the climate crisis. And I'd like to mention a few things that came up in the City Council retreat. You talked about a climate action plan, and I wanted, Mr. Domowski may correct me on this, but People for Climate Action have been working with the King County Council on this. And what we have learned from Claudia Balducci on the King County Council is that a consultant will be hired around the beginning of March to work on a climate action plan. And they're hoping for a climate action plan by the summer. And since we are a member city, we can use that climate action plan. And as I understand it, there may be a small fee, but that would still be a lower cost than if Kenmore developed it on its own. I'd also like to support something that the Deputy Mayor said in the retreat. You talked about legislation to require the best environmental solution for city issues. That's been legislation that's close to my heart for a while, and I've wanted to bring it up. And I believe there's also right now state legislation along those lines that covers state parks, ironically. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gerlin.
Nadia Silver?
Hi, my name is Nadia Silver. I live at 18230 70th Lane Northeast here in Kenmore. I've been a Kenmore resident now for a little over 2 years. First, I want to say congratulations to the new members. Just ridiculously excited about that. And also congratulations to the continuing members, also ridiculously excited about that. When I came here 2 years ago, and when I started speaking about a year ago, I pretty much at you guys for not having a whole lot of diversity and not a whole lot of female, and I don't see any LGBTQ support. But now with the new electives, I'm going to have to eat my words, so sorry about that. I actually see that you guys do genuinely care about diversity. You guys do genuinely care about equitability. And being multiracial myself is something, I'm always a social advocate. So to see the city that I live in grow and maybe have 1% to do with that still makes me happy. So I wanted to say thank you for that. On the other part of it, you guys, I was recently, this past, 2019, August, I think it was, where the vaping thing age was raised. And so, yay on that one. My friends, really good friends, know that I have a teenager. They like to test you. Mine has definitely done that. And so with the age being 21 and his 15, it's less likely that he'll get a hold of a vaping pen now, although he's managed to tinker and get it working, but that's a different thing. Anyway, so I'm just saying that I see what you guys are doing. You guys are working hard. It may take more time than anyone really wants it to, but at least you're getting there and you're doing it, and I really appreciate that. So thank you also for that. I look forward to constantly giving you equitable feedback in the future. I submit my time.
Thank you, Ms. Silver.
John Hendrickson.
John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. Congratulations to our new council members. I gave you all a series of emails this morning, and I hope that even though it didn't have any effect on who you chose as mayor, that you will read them carefully and be prepared to speak to members of the community, because I plan to have that information spread broad and wide around the community as we go through this financial crisis, financial unsustainability, whatever you want to call the issues that we have now. Dave's not the person to lead us through that, which those emails show you. Unless you just want to lie to everybody. And then if that's what you want to hide behind Dave, you can do that. As far as the accessory dwelling unit issue goes here, when they had the public hearing at the Planning Commission, two people, a couple showed up and one other person showed up. No one in town knows what's going on with this accessory dwelling unit issue. No one is talking about concurrency, and it's a zoning issue that needs to be changed. If you want to have residential 6 units per acre and change that to residential 12 units per acre or residential 18 units per acre, that's what it should be called. But then don't say that we have single-family residences when you can put these small accessory dwelling units right in the middle when you already have these lots, since we incorporated, that are so small. I mean, how are you going to cram this in? And so people mean well, but how do you do well? Everyone wants a good quality of life. And a lot of these issues have come in. You see going up in Shoreline. And in Shoreline now, if you, in the middle of the afternoon, you take the bus, you will see prostitutes, not just walking blatantly during the middle of the day on Aurora in Seattle, but they're in Shoreline too. You know, young women whose psyches are being damaged forever. No one's doing anything about it. Okay? And so this accessory dwelling unit, no one knows about it. It's really a corrupt process. Put it in the newsletter to get the information out on it. As far as the Sammamish Bridge goes, I think it's very foolhardy for us to be putting up the balance of the money to pay for it. King County in the feasibility study was going to add a lane to the bridge back in '99. It was in their 6-year plan. Okay? That brings economic development and quality of life to people on the south end. Getting funding for bridges is not supposed to be paid by cities. That's what the Federal Highway Administration is for. Okay? Our city manager is known as a rainmaker. A lot of that came from the money he got for the bridge. But you're supposed to get that money from the bridge, from federal gas taxes, state gas taxes, not municipalities. Put it off, add the third lane to the bridge like we should have done 20 years ago. Otherwise, you're going 30 years in the future without it. And you're going to hurt our economy, hurt their quality of life, add the accessory dwelling units, and you're going to be like Shoreline.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Hendrickson.
There's nobody else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to be heard? Yes, please. If you would be so kind as to sign up when you're finished.
I will. I hadn't planned. Hi, I'm Karen Prince. I've spoken before. It's hard to sit here and
Your
not
name
say anything.
and where you live?
I live in Kenmore.
Great.
Up by Arrowhead School.
Thank you.
I guess I have no prepared remarks tonight, but I just want to emphasize to all of you, and congratulations to the new council members. I'm against the ball field in the park, as you know. We have to protect the environment. So I know that this all sounds like the same old thing, but one thing I don't think was mentioned tonight, although I support all the other comments, is exclusivity. The ball fields, for one thing, it's a municipal type of ball field, and that belongs in the city, somewhere else. And I don't believe that you've done due diligence to find or make user agreement partnerships to find and to enhance the school ball fields. But I would just say it's a municipal project. It is a state park, although it's in Kenmore. So that means it's for everybody. And when the ball fields, if it goes through, the students are going to be up there, the young people are going to be up there playing. That means that it isn't available for other people to just use freely, which it should be as a state park. So I'm thinking of the legacy for the future. I read your values, Kenmore's values, and wanting to support environmental sustainability. And I just want you to really think about it when you think about putting that ball field in that precious area up there at St. Edward's. It would be, think about the things that will be gone if that goes in. That can go somewhere else. We just need to find it. And a lot of us that are against the field there would be happy to help you. I don't know what we can do, but we want it. We want the ball fields somewhere, but not there. So anyway, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. Anybody else? Anybody else wishing to be heard? So I'll declare the public comments closed. For those of you, most of you that spoke on the ball fields, we are having a special meeting here on February 3rd at 7 o'clock. And I would encourage you all to come for that meeting. Again, that's February 3rd at 7 o'clock, where the only item on the agenda will be the ball fields. And I expect this room to be packed. So in any event, thank you tonight for your comments, and I know we'll hear more on the 3rd. Ms. Grayland, thank you very much for your comments on a climate action plan. At our retreat over the weekend, we chose to create a climate action plan for Kenmore as, I believe, number 3 on our top 5 priorities for this next year. So we are moving forward with that. It's very important to us. So we have listened. With that, I thank you for your comments. Next item on the agenda is joint meeting with the Planning Commission. So Ms. Gregory, Ms. Spence and Lori Anderson, and I believe a couple of Planning Commission members. 3 of them, wonderful.
Good evening, Council. Well, technically, as we only have 3 Planning Commission members here tonight, it is not a joint meeting because we do not have a quorum of the Planning Commission. However, it does not prohibit the Planning Commission giving their recommendations. They came to a recommendation at a Planning Commission meeting, so they can report on that recommendation to you tonight. So there are 2 items for discussion tonight. One, we'll start with the Parks, Recreation and Open Space Plan. So what we would like to do is Laurie will give an overview of the process and kind of outline the pros plan content, how it is set up. And then following that, the Planning Commission members that are here this evening will give you some of their perspectives regarding how this discussion went with the Planning Commission and highlight some of those issues and topics. After the discussion, we are available for questions. Depending on the questions that you give us tonight, we can certainly come back next week and follow up based on your direction and questions. And we are hopeful that we'll be ready to approve by resolution the PROS plan sometime in February, to provide that document to the State Recreation and Conservation Office by March 1st. So, Mayor, if it's okay with you, we'd like to proceed first with the brief presentation.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
If there are questions that come up, do you want them after? Do you want them during? How would you prefer them, Mr. Mulcair?
It's however you want to do that. It's fine by us. We're ready.
Mr. Chair, is there any way you prefer it?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yes.
I would say if you could at least wait till after the person has finished his or her
Great.
presentation, would that be okay?
So we'll hold questions until the end of the presentation. All right. Wonderful.
Okay, so the Planning Commission has asked me to give a brief presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, on the process and contents of this very voluminous document you have in front of you. And probably the best place to start is to introduce the commissioners who are here this evening. The chair, Mark Orenshaw, Nathan Lutzis, and Carol Baker, for those of you who don't know the commissioners. So I'll go ahead and start the presentation and then turn it over to the Planning Commission. So the purpose of the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan is to provide an overarching policy document with direction for the future of parks and recreation planning in the city. It's important particularly because, as Debbie mentioned, it is a requirement of the Washington State Parks Recreation and Conservation Office for the city to be eligible for grant funding, and we receive a lot of grant funding from this office, so we hope to maintain that eligibility. They require an update to the plan every 6 years. Our last plan was approved in 2013, and we are hoping to have approval by March 1st of this year with the updated plan. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with Kenmore's park system. We have 13 parks totaling about 146 acres, including many miles of multipurpose trails. Significantly, 80% of the parkland is forested, wetlands, or part of a natural system. If you were to add in all of the acreage from either other jurisdictions or other providers of park and recreation services, it totals about 475 acres, and of course, St. Edward State Park is a big part of that. Programming, recreation programming, has been done and presumably would continue to be done in partnership with private entities. In terms of planning for the future, the Planning Commission considered that over this 20-year horizon of the plan, the population would increase to about 31,000 people. That's an additional 7,000 people in the city of Kenmore, and that was based on work that was done with the comprehensive plan update in 2015 and then extended out for an additional 5 years. One important component of the plan that wasn't in the last PROS plan is a demand and needs analysis, which looked at a number of metrics for how to consider what is an appropriate amount of parkland or what type of parkland would be important for the city. And those metrics included things like recreation trends, it included the community surveys, benchmark comparisons, population growth. There was also an analysis of geographic context, etc. The plan includes a walkshed analysis, again, another new feature that talked about having every person be within a 10-minute or about a half-mile walk from a park, and then use that to look at where there might be gaps in service. At the end of the plan is a level of service analysis. There's one for both the existing condition and one that is aspirational. As one of the citizen commenters mentioned, there's been community involvement in developing the plan. It started in 2015 with the Imagine Kenmore initiative and then the Walkway and Waterways bond survey. In 2019, a statistically valid community survey was conducted, and that was included as an appendix in the PROS plan. And then an informal survey and an open house last fall were conducted. Then, of course, the Planning Commission has been reviewing the plan over many meetings and making their recommendations. From the community input, no surprise, 70% of those responding were very supportive of water-dependent recreation. Other high-priority facilities, and these are in order, an indoor swimming pool and aquatic center, nature trails, paved walking and bike paths, indoor exercise facilities, off-leash dog park, natural areas, reserves, and community recreation center. Those were the high-priority facilities. For the medium priority facilities, the top 5 were art gallery, indoor theater, large community parks, indoor gymnasiums, outdoor multi-use athletic fields, and small neighborhood parks. So the guiding fundamentals of the PROS plan center on the characteristic most used when describing the system, which is the natural environment. And key values are to protect and steward, to partner, that's a new value added to this PROS plan, predominantly related to recreation programming, to create balance, and to instill civic pride. So the goals, objectives, and policies in the plan have been significantly reorganized, but the basic content is the same. There is a new goal about engaging the community. And later this year, if the docket is approved, then the city would be reviewing the goals, objectives, and policies to incorporate into the parks, recreation, and open space element of the comprehensive plan. So we anticipate bringing those back later this year, again, if that remains on the proposed docket. The last piece of the plan that I want to mention is the Capital Facilities Plan, which identifies short, medium, and long-term projects. So the Capital Facilities Plan, or CFP, is an unconstrained, fiscally unconstrained list of possible parks projects. And these projects were identified using, again, the demand and need analysis and the community surveys, et cetera. The Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is the actual funded list. 6-year funded list. The CIP is adopted separately from the CFP and is actually not included in the PROS plan, although the projects are listed on the CFP list. There are some new additions, Morelands Trail Connection, Phase 2 of Squires Landing, a partnership in a regional aquatic center or community center, and a feasibility study to address the Bastyr ball fields. The lease for those ball fields is up in 2025. There are also some other projects that are not funded or not show funding. Safe routes to parks, ADA or universal access, repair and maintenance, and public arts and culture, among other things. So these needs haven't been assessed or ranked, and the funding levels are not known at this time. However, some of these projects may be included in already funded parks projects. So next steps. Tonight, the council will discuss recommendations with the Planning Commission, and then you would direct staff on any changes or questions you have. The goal is to adopt the PROS plan by resolution in February, and at that time submit it to the state for approval. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Planning Commission.
Well, it's my responsibility to give you a little bit of the strategy we had when we worked on this project. It's quite a huge packet of information. You've all read it, I'm sure, right? But some of the overarching themes that you might think about as you move forward is that this is really all about maximizing the natural resources we have, and the key word is waterfront. It's about creating connection, maintaining connection. It's about collaboration, and it's about flexibility. And it really is all about planning. And so it's aspirational in that it is the underlying framework document that allows us to approach the state and secure funds for projects that we have had, in the lineup, so to speak. I kind of like to think of this as a public relations document. It's not the actual steps you're going to take, but it's the framework that we use in the city to talk about what do we want our city to look like in our parks and recreation. But when we worked on our recommendations to move towards the overarching goals and the specific ways to get there, you will find this on page 73 through 81, but we want to improve access. We want to improve specifically access to the water. We want to support active and healthy lifestyles, and we want to have conservation of what is already built and preserve the natural environment. We want to provide a diverse range of parks and interest to the users that are in our community, and do it in a way that allows for flexibility and change. As my co-commissioners highlight some of the specifics, keep in mind water access, connection, collaboration, and flexibility.
So, as you can tell by just doing the math, 4 of our commissioners are not here. One had hoped to be here, but he was not able to make it because of a work commitment. So Lori has graciously agreed to read his talking points for us.
Yes, the good news is Mike Vanderlinde had already written his talking points and then found out at the last minute today that he could not be at this meeting. So his comments. Early on, the Planning Commission recognized the need to address 2 factors that limit long-range PROS planning. The first is Kenmore residents' and visitors' expectations and use of parks, recreation, and open spaces will change over time. Second, we cannot know today precisely how those needs and expectations will change. Some activities may grow more popular, others perhaps less so, highlighting the need for flexibility in future planning. To account for this uncertainty, the Commission sought to develop durable policies that would provide decision makers sufficient flexibility in the future. And then to identify future trends likely to impact the demand and use of PROS by Kenmore's population into the future, the Commission incorporated the best information available today, and he was talking about the demand and needs analysis here, that to look through a number of lenses at how to assess adequacy. Among the impacts the Commission took into account were demographic shifts, e.g. the aging population and changes in family composition, the increase in the number of people living and seeking to live in Kenmore, and the increased population density that we're expecting.
Great. Well, my role is to highlight some of the key big picture themes, and Carol has already touched on them, and Lori has as well, but I'll try to be brief on some of those. One is the value and importance of the waterfront and natural systems, which I think have already been well covered here, and also has been made clear as a priority by the community as well. Second is the idea of connections to the waterfront and to other parks and recreation opportunities, largely via trails and walking bicycle routes. And I think these types of connections, as noted, are also highly valued by residents. Carol also brought up the theme of balance and diversity, which I think is really good. And that the balance, as we looked at it, was between things like passive and active recreation, between opportunities for people of different age groups, abilities, and interests, between facilities and programs, and between types of parks, such as those that mainly serve local neighborhoods and those that serve a broader population. So fourth one that Carol also mentioned is collaboration. I know you all are fully aware that the city can't do everything by itself in terms of parks and recreation, and so partnerships with and relying on and supporting other providers is, I think, a key part of our PROS plan. And last but not least, which I think also has been touched on, is the notion of fiscal realism and setting priorities for the city's investments in parks and recreation. As you are all well aware, the city has finite resources and can't certainly do everything immediately that people want. And I think that the capital facilities plan speaks to this to some respect. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Lutzis.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm here tonight to speak about the capital facilities plan. This is the part where we look ahead more about funding, where it's allocated and where we want to go with this funding or potential funding that we may get. So the capital facilities plan, or CFP, you can find on page 91 of your pros plan if you'd like to follow along. There are some charts that would talk about the allocation of these funds, and so if you're interested in that, you can look along there. The capital facilities plan identifies proposed capital projects, acquisitions, and development of physical facilities within the park system that correspond to the planned recommendations described in this pros plan. These projects have emerged from reviewing the results of the analysis of the community needs through this planning process. And each of these projects is cross-referenced to the Parks and Recreation goal or goals that the project supports. So the capital facilities plan is broken into three parts. There's the short term, the long term, or mid-term, and the long term. The short term is also known as the CIP, or the Capital Improvements Plan, and the Capital Improvements Plan, as previously discussed, is the fiscally constrained 6-year plan directly tied to anticipated funding available within that time frame. So it's funds that we already have or funds that we are going to have that have already been sorted out into these different projects. The midterm and long term have not yet achieved these funds. And so the short term is broken down into the next 6 years. The midterm is broken down from 7 to 12 years, and the long term is broken into 13 or more years. So on page 92 is the first chart of the CIP, or the first 6 years of the capital facilities plan. And some main things to highlight are the Swamp Creek wetland acquisition. These are some of the big ticket items, along with Squires Landing Waterfront Access Project, Log Boom Park Waterfront Access Project, the St. Edwards Ballpark Field, which is funding would be going towards the SEPA or the EIS, and the EIS is the Environmental Impact Statement, and the SEPA is the State Environmental Policy Act. So it's another thing that goes hand in hand with the EIS to determine how much of an environmental impact this project would have. Also, some new projects that we have on this CIP are the Swamp Creek Wetland Trail Access Point and the Linwood Park, and those are down lower on the chart. Some other things to take note of are the projects that have been completed, and these include the Morelands Park improvements, the Rhododendron Park boardwalk and float mitigation, and the Squires Landing replacement float mitigation. In the short term, there's a budgeted $11,922,000, or that not budgeted, but an estimated amount of this total cost of these projects here. Moving on to the midterm, which would be 7 to 12 years of the capital facilities plan. Some of the big items on here are the Bastier Field replacement, the feasibility study, along with St. Edwards State Park ball field that's under development, or the section of development here in this section. Existing park capacity improvements, expansion or new features, and the Water Walk Trail development feasibility and implementation. Also in this midterm, you'll see a lot of money is allocated for park acquisition and expansion, and that's where you will see a lot of these larger numbers as well. In the long-term portion of this capital facilities plan, which is 13 plus years, some of the items to note are the Aquatic Community Center partnership acquisition, which would be about a quarter of the cost, the Sammamish River Waterfront Park acquisition, and the Lake Washington Waterfront Park development. Also, these items, you'll see a lot of money positioned or allocated for more park land acquisition or expansion. Overall, the cost of both the short term, within the next 6 years, the CIP, the midterm, the 7 to 12 years, and the long term, the 13 plus years, should or is estimated to be about $201,457,160, and that's the capital facilities plan.
Great, so that, I guess, ends our formal presentations on the pros plan, but we'd be happy to entertain any comments or questions.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I have two major concerns. And the first one is probably best illustrated on page 63. It's called Geographic Distribution Key Findings. Number one, so my concern is that findings or observations are being mixed with recommendations. I think it's just confusing to do that. So for instance, number one, Kenmore has a great overall distribution and so on. That's an observation. Number 7, the quality of the parks is high. Again, an observation or finding. Number 8, Kenmore has an extensive network of natural systems from waterways to wetlands and urban forests. However, there is very little public access. So those are findings, but the other things, acquire new parkland, acquire and develop. So number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, to me feel like they're recommendations. So I think it would be easier to read and understand if these were divided into 2 separate or headlines. And then the other area that illustrated that was page 72. We don't need to go there. Probably there are more places, but those were the 2 that stuck out to me. The second idea that I have concern with is the idea that because our population is going to grow, we must buy more property. And I disagree with that for several standpoints. One, a lot of our parks are not well used now. So I invented the term density of use. And what I mean by that is, let's say Wall Swamp Creek or Squires Landing, very little of it is even accessible. So if you take the usable piece and divide it by the population, and then you increase the usability 10 times, you have more than enough capacity to meet the needs, I think, without buying more property. So sort of the concept, increase usefulness, not necessarily quantity. And I think if people had the question, would you rather have a park within 10 minutes or would you rather have waterfront access? I think they'll choose waterfront access. So I think the 10-minute thing is kind of cool to look at, but I wouldn't develop the policy in our spending around that idea. I really would stay focused on what do the people really want. And then a couple, let's see, so there pages 52, 63, 74, 76 are the ones that have some sort of the ideas that I was looking at. So 52, again, that proportionality idea, I don't think it's necessary. And let's see if I missed anything here. No, I think I got those. And then my third point, actually, I missed. It's a really minor one. On page 74, it says to acquire the tolt, and I don't think we can do that. I think the tolt belongs to somebody else. So I think we can obtain use of the area over the pipeline, but the word acquire didn't seem quite right to me. So those are my ideas.
Any other thoughts? Councilmember Shrevenick.
Just had a couple. I think I might have brought this up at the retreat, but I guess I'd like it more, we kind of talk about partnering with programming. I just want to punctuate somewhere in the document. You guys can figure out the best place. But really exploring the partnerships around the facilities, the gym and pool. I think we're all on the same page with that, but I just didn't see that punched up. And this was something, this next piece I did mention at the retreat. It would be great to have a map of where we have trails and walkways and sidewalks. We don't have, as you've pointed out in places on here, kind of safe routes between parks. We don't really have what Dave Marin used to call trails and walkways that go somewhere. And so without kind of putting that on a map, it's kind of hard to visualize where the gaps are. And we've done so much with sidewalks in the last few years that I would love to see that represented visually. And the last comment, second to last comment, I actually do like the 10-minute walk shed idea, but I do get Councilmember Curtis's point about it may be a leap to go to the next idea, which is acquiring. I'm not sure. And on that note, I would love to hear a little bit more around how the two new projects were identified on the six-year CIP. And I'm not sure whether it got fixed or reflected, but on the, and this is just because I know it personally, the KWAC figures, there's discussion of membership, which is great, and that's accurate as far as it goes, but there's a lot of use, much more use of those programs than are reflected in the membership. There's, at least double in terms of participants that are not members on an ongoing basis, because there's lots of summer camps and school-based programs and various things. So it kind of, the way it's written, it kind of under-reflects what those programs are doing. That's it.
Okay, so just a reminder, we're looking to give preliminary direction tonight on the project. Are we heading in the right direction? The questions you're asking are being noted and changes, and I want to have the Planning Commission and certainly staff keep in mind that there's a meeting here on February 3rd, and some of that will probably incorporate it into changes on the pros plan. So there's more happening. Anyway, Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Councilmember Sherman said. I really like the addition of a watershed analysis. While I agree with Councilmember Curtis that increasing the usability of our parks is an important tool that we need to do more of. I think especially if you're a young parent with young kids, having a small playground or little area, a little neighborhood park within walking distance is just invaluable. Not having to toss your kids in the car to drive down to Log Boom or something is great and is a real amenity for a neighborhood. Also, I saw, there's two things in here that I kind of see are connected. One is a Linwood Park master plan, and also and the second thing I see is a need for a dog park. I haven't been there for a couple of years, but it's got a nice little playground, and it has a huge just swath of unused, flat, grassy area. I'll save $100,000 in the master plan right now. Let's just put a dog park in there and call it a day. It's a really underused area. I think there's more than enough room to put in a dog park and still keep the current playground. And I think it would address a need that we have. And I think we could probably do a dog park for less than $700,000 over there. I'm just guessing. Maybe I'm underestimating the cost of fence, but I think that that's something we could probably knock off relatively quickly. And it is a need I've heard from a lot of folks. And the one that they did over as a temporary in Bothell was a huge hit. And I think they're doing something permanent over in Bothell now with their dog park. And I say this as a just adamant cat owner myself. I have no skin in this game. So anyway, I'm just tossing that out there. I'd be supportive of going forward with a dog park out there right now and calling it a day and getting that park actually used effectively. Because right now I only went there because I was on council and I looked at a map and I saw that we had a park I'd never heard of. So I drove out there with my kid, and luckily there's a playground and we had a great time. But it's underutilized, and I think that we could put it to good work. And yes, people from Lake Forest Park will use it. That's fine. We'll use their facilities in exchange. So.
Councilmember Marshall.
Okay, and thanks for a very comprehensive presentation and plan. I mean, there's a ton of information in there, a lot of exciting ideas, and I second the notion. I think I recall a lot of community support for a dog park or some possibility thereof. That's a lot to work on, but it'd be great to see something like that in there. I wanted to recall Mayor Baker's a comment about the timing of the two meetings coming up, and then I think Ms. Bent wanted to comment on that.
I certainly can. The pros plan is the policy document, so that's the guiding document for future decisions on parks. I think we've heard some comments this evening, and I think you've received the petition which was asking the council to remove the St. Edward's ball field from the pros plans, specifically from the CFP, where it's identified in the medium term for implementation. I think based on the community surveys that athletic fields were a medium priority. I think there is documentation to support that over 20 years there may be the need for additional ball fields. So a suggestion only is that perhaps in the pros plan document you remove the reference specifically to St. Edward's ball field and just say athletic fields. And what this will do then, it would give the flexibility that if in the future there is an opportunity for a partnership for a ball field and or acquisition for land for a ball field, then that is identified in the CFP so that council then could consider a future project when funding is available to include on the CIP. So that would be my recommendation. Along with that, we could then look at the pros plan and remove a reference to the ball field, St. Edward's ball field specifically, and just make it more general to athletic fields. So that is a suggestion. I think that people who spoke tonight have said that it's basically that they're not opposed to athletic fields in general. It seems to be more opposition to the specific location of that ball field. And I think my suggestion might be a good compromise.
That's true, but don't forget we do have a meeting and there are other people in the community, so.
And the ball field decision, the decision about the ball field on February 3rd is specifically related to whether to move forward with additional spending for the ball field project. It is a separate decision from your direction and decision on the pros plan policy document.
Great. Okay, where do we go first? Councilmember Fowl.
I want to thank you, Debbie, for bringing forth that recommendation, and I think that is one that we should strongly consider adopting, and I think that would be fair in moving forward. Additionally, what I don't see in this pros plan is any mention of partnerships and working with schools for increasing playability or use of combined use fields, and I'd like to see that. I think we have an opportunity to work together with our local school district and increase a local neighborhood use of sport fields, improve opportunities for both children at play in their schools, increasing safe play, and offering additional play space for our community to utilize ball field space. And I understand there's a good program within the King County Dow Constantine's program. And also in Robin Abowski's office, there are some options with grants. So I think those are some things we should look towards to improve opportunities for our community and improve relationships. And we want to have a neighborhood and community where people can play safely. I have concern in hearing the many different positions on the ball field at St. Edward's, and why we are still waiting for the EIS to come back. I think this is a good time to pause and wait for that EIS and listen to our community in February.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Oh, I just want to thank you, Debbie, for the astute recommendation to remove St. Ed's from the recommendation for our ball fields. It's clear our community is in need of ball fields, so I like the more general approach to that. I'd also like to echo Councilmember Fowle's recommendation that we include working with the district in looking for recreational resources. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
My item's already been covered.
Councilmember Marshall.
Okay. And I think that partnerships with the district were covered in the pros plan. It's a great point that Councilmember File makes and everything. Could you outline at least a little bit about that?
Well, I think, and Lori and Debbie certainly step in. We certainly, when we looked at ball fields and other sort of active facilities, we certainly, I believe we included some specific language about opportunities to continue working. There are certainly currently programs and leagues that do use school fields, so that is ongoing. There were some, as I recall, some limitations on using school fields. The schools obviously have priority over, say, youth leagues as a general proposition. But I believe you're correct, Councilman Marshall, that was covered in our plan. So.
And a couple questions. Was the inventory or the result of the North Lake Little League looking for 4 fields? I think that was sort of the goal. Did that take into account existing fields, and then most specifically maybe the new Moorlands field, or if you know?
Yeah, again, I invite Debbie and Lori to add. My recollection is that, the inventory does include, it certainly includes the Moorlands field. It also includes the current Bastyr fields. I think there was some mention also made of, speaking of partnerships, I believe the Bastyr Fields lease expires in 2025. So looking forward, that is certainly a key element of providing active ball fields, at that point forward. And I believe the St. Edward's Field, separate from, the issue, did come up as at least one possibility. We did not address it in any detail as a commission. It was included in the plan as one potential field to meet the projected needs for baseball and soccer.
Thanks for that. And then if I might, how was I'm very excited about the aquatic center. I think that's a great amount of detail that you provide, at least on that. How was the figure of an estimated or possible cost arrived at? What research did you do on that?
I'll defer to city staff on that. They know better.
I think Shoreline was looking at a measure for a pool, and so we looked specifically at that. That was the most current data that we found, and so we will look. I think it was largely based on that data, and then I think we probably threw in some dollars in there for potential acquisition as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Charbonnet.
Just a couple little things. I also like Debbie's idea of softening the language of that line item to take out the St. Edward's specificity, but keeping the line item in there about ball fields, and it kind of fits with what Carol said around flexibility. On the Linwood Master Plan, I think we've gone back and forth on this, but I want to encourage us to get out in front of with neighbors on that at the very earliest stage of the work. And the last, I did have a question, and I would like to hear more about it, how those 2 new proposals kind of came to be. How did you get to that decision? So when we get done with other folks, it'd be great to hear that.
Any other questions? Councilmember Curtis.
So I also have a comment on the Linwood Park. I think it has the potential of being a little like the North Shore Park up on the hill, that before it was improved, it really didn't have a lot of use, and it was pretty overgrown. And then once we updated it, my impression is it's used a lot by people in the immediate neighborhood. And I think Linwood, rather than writing it off, to say, if we got the citizens' input from people around there, and if we improved it, I think the use would increase.
Yes, I would tend to agree with that. I know there's a lot of community involvement when we have a parks built, when we do anything that gets the immediate community involved in any type of rehab work on the park or any type of improvement in the park. So I do agree with that statement. Anybody else? Councilmember O'Kane.
There were just a couple of things that I wanted to say. First, I really was impressed with the detail and breadth of scope of the proposal that you put before us. Second, with regard to athletic fields, multi-use recreational fields, I really liked the detail and identifying that it is not just baseball, it's soccer, cricket, all sorts of sports. There are many needs for the field, and looking out into the future at population growth, giving attention to our growing need. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that I see the needs for recreational fields. And I do want to switch to a comment that came up today that I thought was interesting and I'd be interested in seeing included in the plan, which is the passive use of that field. I think it is important to give attention to that. If it is, how that field is used in the future. It's not determined yet, but I would be interested in seeing reference to the passive use that is there.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. Actually, there were 2 points that as we move ahead to implement the direction I heard this evening, there were 2 points that I didn't hear how many council members were supporting. The first one had to do with increasing mobility or usability of existing parks versus acquisition. It was a point raised by Dr. Curtis. And I don't know if that emphasis is something that's shared by the council.
Yes, I agree with that.
I agree with that assessment.
Yeah, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I mean, unlike Councilmember Chris, I don't view it as a either or. I think both. I think a couple more pocket parks, a couple more neighborhood-sized parks in the city would be a good thing, but I also think increasing the usability of our current parks is a plus, so.
Okay, I'm seeing 3 heads nod in that direction.
Councilmember File?
I also agree with Councilman Curtis, and I think this is a good direction to take.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
There was one more.
Okay.
I have a question on this one.
Councilmember Curtis has something.
So I guess the question really is there enough support for my idea not to spend millions of dollars in our capital funding plan for buying 2 more parks? So I would like to be that specific, and I don't really care if we just leave it vague and they're on there and then we never get around it because we never have money. That's one way to do it, but I would rather just be, I think, intellectually honest with ourselves. If I had more money, I'm going to try to get downtown waterfront access. I'm going to improve the parks we have, and buying new parks is not a priority for me. And I'm not sure we gave that clarity of direction. And I don't know if you need that clarity of direction.
Well, I think you've outlined there's 2 approaches there. So I think as you've outlined 2 approaches, I think it would be good to get direction on which approach council would like to see in the pros plan.
Deputy Mayor? Sorry, I just scratched my neck. Okay. Councilmember Marshall?
To that extent, respectfully, I wouldn't want to limit ourselves to that extent right now.
I would be with Councilmember Marshall on that point.
Okay. So I haven't heard any majority say eliminate any projects from the list at this point, so we will not do that.
All right.
So I had one more
Sure.
that I did not have complete clarity on, and that was softening the language about the St. Edward ball field, to leave ball fields in, but take out that specific reference. I heard 3 council members think that that was a good approach at this point, knowing that the project itself, wherever it is, will be determined through a separate series of actions. But there's the 4th one.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, the question.
Sorry, spilled some water. So I know, Ms. Bennett, you said you regarded these as separate issues, the St. Edwards in particular and the rest of it. Doesn't it make sense to allow the public input? My sense would be we allow the public input, full public participation in the question of St. Edward ball fields, and then this adoption is to come after that, whatever decision is made there. I'd just like to err on the side of public participation.
I think we would, based on your direction this evening, could bring back a revised document for your consideration on February 10th, which would be after the direction on specifically should proceeding further with spending money on the ball field. However, if we're bringing this forward on the 10th, at this point then, I think we would take out the specific reference to the St. Ed ball field. It would still give you the flexibility whether you move forward or not, because it's then more general in the pros plan.
So we'd still have the option of all the language or both those options. Okay, I see.
Okay.
Councilman Rafael?
So about the St. Edward's ball field, and continuing forward with additional studies and spending funds towards those studies, I want to make sure we are fully in agreement that we're going to wait for a good input, and we are pausing before moving forward on approving any of those funds otherwise.
I think February 3rd, the intention is to come forward, and I believe at the retreat, the city manager outlined some potential options for how you could move forward or choose not to move forward with the ball field. So that meeting will be specifically to discuss and get direction.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Nope, not on the pros plan.
Great.
But we do have another topic.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I want to move on to ADUs.
Yes. So we do not have a PowerPoint for this, but I will ask Laurie to kind of give an overview of the recommendations on accessory dwelling units. And if you remember, this was on your docket. This was one of the housing strategy items for affordable housing. So that was the reason it was put on the docket, and asking the Planning Commission to consider the policy implications, which they have done and are now bringing forward their recommendation. So Laurie will give an overview, and then the commissioners here tonight will give some of their perspectives on the proposed changes.
Okay, so I think you all know that accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, are small apartments or cottages that are accessory to a principal residential dwelling unit. And so the city's current regulations allow both attached and detached ADUs. An attached ADU is one that's in the same structure as the principal residence. So for example, it could be a basement apartment. It could be a portion of a house that was segregated as a complete independent dwelling unit. A detached ADU, on the other hand, is a separate structure. So it is not contained within the existing house. It's elsewhere on the lot. Anyway, since 1998, again, both attached and detached ADUs have been permitted in the city, and several have been built, although it certainly hasn't been a flood of new units. Currently, detached ADUs can only be built on units or on lots that are 10,000 square feet or greater. So ADUs, as the Planning Commission discovered, provide a number of benefits. They can provide income to a homeowner if they, for example, needed additional income to support their living situation. They can house family members, and many, in fact, are built for family members. And they can provide a more affordable type of housing in between an apartment and a detached single-family home. The units are generally small. I think they average 600 to 800 square feet. And for that reason, although the cost of construction per square foot may be higher, in terms of what they rent for, it's typically less, if any rent is charged at all. Many times when the units are provided to family members, they're provided at no cost to provide an opportunity for intergenerational living, for example. So as Debbie mentioned, looking at the ADU regulations was part of the housing strategy plan. A way to encourage additional ADUs would support housing affordability efforts. And the Planning Commission has been reviewing these regulations for several months. I'm going to briefly touch on the significant changes to the rules, and then the Planning Commission is going to describe different pieces of those changes. So with the amendments, a homeowner could have up to 2 ADUs on their lot, 1 attached and 1 detached. You couldn't have 2 detached or 2 attached. It would have to only be 1 attached or 1 detached. And now a detached ADU could be permitted on a lot of 4,500 square feet or greater, rather than 10,000 square feet or greater. Detached ADU has to be separated from the main residence by 5 feet, a minimum of 5 feet. The ADU sizes range from 600 to 1,000 square feet for a detached ADU, and those numbers change based on the size of the lot. And then an attached ADU is a maximum of 1,000 square feet, although there is an opportunity to allow a greater size if, for example, it would take up a full basement that was more than 1,000 square feet to take advantage of his existing floor space. The maximum height for an ADU would be the same as the maximum height for the actually in all of the single-family zoning districts, which is 35 feet. It's possible to get 3 stories in 35 feet, and so the Planning Commission did not want 3-story ADUs in a detached ADU, for example, so they said 35 feet is fine, but you can only have a 2-story ADU or a 1-story ADU over a detached garage. And that they made that decision based on one council member or one commissioner's particular interest in allowing for vaulted ceilings, for example. They didn't want to drop the height limit in case somebody was doing something very dramatic with their ADU. 1 parking space would continue to be required for each ADU. That's the current standard. And for the owner occupancy, the Planning Commission was firm in supporting the continuation of the owner occupancy requirement. In other words, the owner has to live in one of the 2, either the primary residence or the ADU. But they did recommend an exception to the owner occupancy rules for up to a year in cases of hardship or in a case where maybe the owner was going to be absent for some period of time and they had a close relative, a spouse, a child, who would be responsible for the house. And then the last significant change in the R4 and R6 single-family zoning districts, there's currently a 20-foot rear yard requirement. There's now a recommended exception to that would allow a 10-foot rear yard if an ADU were going to be placed on the property. And again, all of these were designed to encourage production of ADUs. I will say, sort of in conclusion to that, when we looked at the environmental analysis, we did we looked at several communities and the work that they had done and how many ADUs are permitted, et cetera. And we looked at lot sizes and how many new ADUs there might be. Ultimately, we concluded there would be maybe 140, 150 new ADUs that might be created with these changes because even though there might be additional lots, generally only maybe 5% of those who have the opportunity to do an ADU would do one. So that concludes sort of an overview, and we'll turn to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Lori. Excuse me. So after we studied ADUs for some time, we reached some consensus on some general policy positions for any code amendments to enable more ADUs in Kenmore. So in our view, these code amendments are not needed to achieve the city's housing target, which will largely be met through increased multifamily housing. Should seek to increase the variety of housing types within Kenmore. Should support ADUs as an affordable housing option, as Lori mentioned. Should benefit homeowners, whether it's financially or for caregiving or particularly for senior citizens. Should support the character of our single-family neighborhoods, and should avoid creating loopholes that could lead to too much density, ugly structures, or displacing vulnerable residents. So those were sort of our policy agreements. And as Lori already mentioned some of the benefits, I'll kind of review those briefly here. So as she mentioned, ADUs can help seniors age in place and support multi-generation living arrangements. Again, they are an affordable housing option, certainly compared to conventional single-family homes. We think they also make particular sense in Kenmore as an infill housing option, since about 3/4 of our housing stock is currently single-family. Lori mentioned they can generate more income for homeowners. Also, they are flexible and accessible for a relatively broad range of people, again, compared to single-family housing. For example, young couples who may struggle to buy a new home could potentially live in ADUs. And they all also are, I think, by virtue of their smaller sizes and placement on developed lots, I think a form of environmentally friendly new housing. So that said, I just want to add a couple of caveats to that list. First, ADUs, as I think you can imagine, certainly have the potential to create localized impacts on neighborhoods, noise, parking, perceptions or reality of too much density. We've tried to address those in our requirements. Lori mentioned the owner occupancy requirement. I think that's one of the key ones. And my colleagues will share more on our requirements here in just a second. And second, ADUs, of course, as Lori alluded to, will not solve affordable housing in Kenmore, but they are, we think, one useful tool that we think can help a bit on the supply side and that the city can facilitate through these recommended code amendments. So now I'll turn it over, I'll actually turn it over to Lori because she's reading
Mike
the talking
Vanderlyn.
points of, she's Mike Vanderlyn for the moment, so.
All right. So Mike wanted to talk about how basically the sizes of ADUs that are recommended were determined. So at the Commission's request, staff modeled multiple ADU build scenarios and provided the Commission with various development configurations. We did a number of site plans and we looked at what's the average size of a residence, what's the average size of an ADU. If you put them on a lot this big, what would that look like? And then using that information, the Commission reviewed each scenario, taking into account both Kenmore's specific development standards and experiences from other jurisdictions, looking at the distribution and range of lot sizes in Kenmore's single-family neighborhoods, the current single-family neighborhood zoning rules, looking at setbacks, height, and other regulations, the practicality of each scenario in relation to common lot sizes in Kenmore, and the relative impact of each scenario on the ADU's immediate neighbors. Finally, the Commission developed specific recommendations intended to facilitate the homeowner's ability to develop and maintain an ADU. These include establishing that minimum lot size for permitting, the permissible ADU footprint that varies with lot size, and then expanding the currently allowed number of ADUs per lot from 1 to 2. The Commission believes adoption of these recommendations would provide homeowners the opportunity to benefit from ADUs for both multi-generational living situations as well as the opportunity to generate rental income while minimizing the impact of ADU development on the immediate neighborhood.
Great. So the topic that I'm going to present to you to think about is private property ownership and owner occupancy. And we really felt strongly that it's an opportunity for Kenmore's property owners to have this opportunity to build ADUs if they choose to. What you don't want to do is see every lot turn into, something that used to be a single-family dwelling into 3 separate dwellings. So that's the tension that you're dealing with. But because we want to maintain owner occupancy, I think it helps to mitigate some of the tension that could come up in a neighborhood. We also want the property owners to have some way to have an exception. And so as you read through that exception, it does put a lot of responsibility and power into the hands of the city manager or a committee or whoever he chooses to go through those reviews. But if you really think about it, if the way we educate our public about this opportunity is that it's really meant for owner occupancy, it'll probably limit the number of exceptions you would have. But we thought about some, you know, that maybe there's a death in your family and you're the owner and you have to go help somebody else in another state and it's a long period of time. Maybe you have a short-term vocational assignment for a year and you're unable to live in your property. But there's a way to allow that to happen and still have a responsible person close to the owner be watching over the property. So we want to build quality units, but we also want to think about the vision of Kenmore as, you know, 3/4 of our properties are single-family homes, and we want to maintain that.
Adding on to, yes, I might need to borrow that, thank you. So on top of that, the Planning Commission, we'd like to recommend to the City Council some additional supportive steps for ADUs. This would be used to expedite the process and help make it more accessible for the citizens within Kenmore. There are 4 potential options that you may want to take a look at that would be supportive of ADUs in general. One of these would be pre-approved plans and expedited permit processing within the city. So several local jurisdictions, including Kirkland, are considering the creation of pre-approved building plans to streamline the ADU permit application process. There could be some concerns about municipal liability with pre-approved plans and targeting work to only certain builders, but we do believe that there is some benefit with this option. We would also like to encourage an expedited permit process for ADUs in general. And what this might look like is maybe a selection of pre-approved designs or plans for ADUs that any potential citizen, if they'd like to pursue building an ADU, could select, and it would help make the process go faster as opposed to going through that process of designing and getting that design permitted. On top of this, another supportive step would be educational efforts. Successful ADU regulations have been accompanied by simultaneous educational promotion. So we support the idea of potentially incorporating, say, brochures or a guide or additions to the city's webpage with frequently asked questions and kind of a guide for citizens on how to develop or pursue the development of an ADU. And this would help to speed up the process as well. Another step we recommend is an amnesty program. Currently, it is unclear how many illegal ADUs exist within the city boundaries. An amnesty program would be drafted to legalize those ADUs which comply with baseline regulatory requirements. Exemptions for regulatory non-compliance can be explored in cases that don't constitute safety risks. We wanted to forward this idea to the council, but we do believe that this is also a complex idea and might require some significant staff time. We feel that this is important because if there are unknown or illegal ADUs, it could pose a health risk, considering or taking into account public safety and emergency response to another dwelling on the property that is unknown. And one of the last options we are putting out to you guys is the potential lending and financial assistance option. This is one of the most ambitious, yet maybe one of the most problematic options that we are proposing. And this would be in reference to ADUs to directly intervene in the lending market through discussion with lenders. Only a small number of ADU owners are able to finance their ADU by borrowing against expected future value of the ADU. We support the council to ask Arch to open the conversation on this topic, but we can see that there are lots of problems and we do not want the city to pursue this directly.
Great. Well, then, again, that ends our formal presentations on different aspects of ADUs, and open it up to comments, questions.
Yes. Deputy Mayor.
Okay, and I've got a little bit here, so I apologize. First off, I want to thank you for the work that's gone to this. This is super thoughtful, as everything is from the Planning Commission, and I really appreciate the work that went into this. I especially, as I was reading through this, really appreciated the additional supportive steps that you were just talking about. There's some great ideas, and I hope that we really dig into some of those and find ways to make it a little bit easier for folks. Now I'm going to turn into a little bit of a radical here and try to push the boundaries a little bit, so, stay with me for a little bit. I have concerns about the parking requirements. I have concerns with the parking requirements in general, but I feel requiring an additional on-street parking space for each unit, it increased the cost of developing the housing. It drives up the eventual cost to renters. It'll make it impossible on some lots for ADUs to be developed because of their layout. Let me see, may not be room. And even if we do assume that each ADU comes with a car, which isn't necessarily the case right now, especially with kind of demographic shifts with driving and car purchasing, most of the streets, if you drive around through our single-family neighborhoods, have a lot of street parking open. I know people don't like looking at cars parked on the street, but that's part of why the streets exist, is to store cars. And a lot of our unsidewalked neighborhoods, parked cars actually increase the safety for pedestrians by giving a little bit of a buffer or slowing down cars that are driving through it. And does all that without adding additional cost of development of the needed housing. So personally, I'd be in favor of removing the parking requirements, especially in light of, as I was reading through this, I came across something saying that the total residency for the primary residency along with the two ADUs is the same as the single family, the house that currently exists. The residency maximum is 8 per home currently, and it would be 8 per home plus 2 ADUs. Is that correct?
It's 8 unrelated individuals or any number of related individuals.
Okay. But if we're talking about related individuals, we're probably talking about older folks who are probably getting driven around by their relatives. Anyway, seeing as we're not changing the residency, we're not allowing additional residents there under our current code, I'd personally would be in favor of taking a harder look at the parking requirements. I also am going to push back a little bit on the idea of owner-occupied. I'm not married to not doing this, but we don't make somebody who owns a single-family home live next door to the house that they're renting. They could live across the country. They could live in a different neighborhood. They could be an absentee landlord, or they could live across the street. They can live anywhere they want, and they can still rent that home. If our goal is to increase housing stock, this is an impediment to that goal. So I'd be interested in at least having more of a conversation around the owner occupancy. And then this came up during your presentation around the 35-foot height limit, which I think makes sense, seeing as it's a single-family neighborhood and the height limit there is 35 feet. But if we're going to allow 35 feet, I don't understand aesthetically from the exterior the difference between a 3-story 35-foot ADU and a 2-story 35-foot ADU. The square footage is the same, or at least the maximum square footage isn't changing. So I just don't see the point in saying, well, it can be this tall, but you're only allowed to do 2. Maybe that just forces people or just encourages more unaffordable ADUs with vaulted ceilings and other fancy things like that. I don't know. But I just, from an aesthetic standpoint, I get, we have height requirements and we're going to have other requirements for how it looks. But if somebody wants to build a 3-story, 35-foot ADU that is still under the square footage limit, I don't see any harm in doing that. If they could build the exact same envelope or even a smaller, slightly larger envelope if you're looking at just square footage and still have have a 2-story 35-foot ADU. Does that make sense? So anyway, those are my concerns, but I really do appreciate all the work within this. This is very thoughtful, and this is pushing the conversation in a great way. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
Thank you for your work. I think I'm probably leaning a little bit the other direction. So I originally lived in Wallingford, and we lived in a 1,000 square foot house on a 5,000 square foot lot. So 50 foot wide, 100 feet wide, 15 feet to each neighbor on each side. And I cannot imagine how on a 5,000 square foot lot, you can add 2 more ADUs, one attached and one detached. To me, that feels like a triplex in disguise, and a triplex on 5,000 square feet just feels, it feels like we're overdoing it for that small of a lot. Now, an 8,000 square foot lot, I'd have no problem with doing the primary residence plus a detached and attached. You know, I would, like in Wallingford, we were at a point in our life we could only afford 1 car, so it worked great. But if you put 2 more ADUs onto that lot, at least one person probably would have a car, maybe both. So then you've got 3 cars, and again, I'm thinking Wallingford density, 5,000 square foot lots with 3 dwelling units on each lot. That just seems excessive to me. So I guess I would personally, and I guess the council will give direction, I'd personally like to see like an 8,000 or greater foot lot before we let it go to 3. Between 5,000 and 8,000, just have 1 ADU. So that would be my preference. The second concern I had was the limit of 1,000 square foot, and I understand that with city manager approval, it can go higher than that. But I think a lot of older houses, the basement and the main floor are the same size. So my house is a good example, 1,400 square feet up or down. So and old people should never go up and down stairs again. So that's part of my safety message. So I get rid of my basement, and so I've got 1,400 square foot down there, and I can only use 1,000. I'm wasting 400 square feet. Now, I understand I can ask the city manager to approve a 1,400, but it feels to me like that shouldn't require special permission, that something should be written in that if it's a 2-floor, one on top of each other, the basement, whatever the square feet is, that can be turned into an ADU and attached. And then I guess the third thing I had, there was some mention about both doors can't be on the street side. And to me, that feels like a function of design, and to say, I'm going to put in a whole new door around the back, even though right here beside the front door is the logical place for it, you're going to add extra expense. And does it really make a difference? If you're using a certain number of square feet and there's a certain amount of people and a certain amount of cars, does it really change things that much to have both doors on one side? So I was a little puzzled by why that recommendation. But I think the big deal to me that we'd really have to ask the council, is a 5,000 foot lot with a triplex what we want in Kenmore?
Councilmember Marshall?
Yeah, thank you all for your work. Again, I think we're in agreement that you guys put in a lot of effort and talent and time, and that's very much appreciated. I share Councilmember Kurtz's concern about the density. I had several questions, and you can take these or maybe address them briefly, is fine. I'm concerned, number one, about fire access. Is that concern overblown somewhat, or I'm mainly concerned about how is there fire access around sides of houses? Does there have to be adequate distances addressed, and then where is enforcement for monitoring if there's going to be obstructions, vegetation, other objects, vehicles, whatever it is? That's one question. It looks like staff wanted to address that. That'd be great.
Right, and actually there are several points. I just want to share some of the thinking behind them. So if you don't mind, I'll go back to a couple of other comments. One comment had to do with a 35-foot height limit and the 3-story requirement. The specific conversation the Planning Commission had about that was that having someone on a 3rd story looking down on the neighbor's yard could be concerning, and they didn't view, right or wrong, they didn't view someone standing on a 2nd story looking over at a neighbor's yard the same way. So I'm just, again, I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm just giving you the background. Likewise, on the question about 2 ADUs on a 5,000 square foot lot, The Planning Commission had a lot of discussion about that. And that is why for those smaller lots, there's a requirement that if you're going to have 2 more ADUs, one of the attached ADU has to be within the existing footprint of the house. You can't do an addition for an attached ADU. It can only be within the existing footprint. So you'd have a house with the ADU in the existing structure and then a detached ADU. That doesn't really get to the density issue, but it was a concern about how that would feel, what the density would be perceived as. As far as the fire issue, we talked with the fire marshal about their standards, and they have no concerns about allowing a detached ADU. Detached ADU would have to follow the same standards as a single-family house. There's no evidence or data that they have that shows that an ADU would be more of a problem than a single-family residence. And they were supportive of the 5-foot separation for a detached ADU. The one caveat they had was that it would be better if that setback, which is often measured from a wall, if you're doing a property line setback, be measured from the eaves, so that you would have 5 feet between the eaves or any other roof projections. So that was their only fire concern.
And then how about enforcement? Was that the same as like everything else with regard to fire or something? They just wouldn't know if people had allowed clutter or something to line up on the side of their house, so the hoses...
Yeah, it would be no different from...
Did they take the hoses to the front door at all? Or
did they what, pardon?
to the front door of the main house or anything, or do they assume going through the sides?
We didn't get to that level of specificity, but again, they reviewed it, the building plans reviewer reviewed it against the city code and fire separation requirements, and the conclusion was that the standards as presented were fine.
Okay, and then we got 62% of our tree canopy, according to our tree survey, is in a single-family residential. Was there any provisions at all for preserving existing trees? I would expect that if you're going to build in the backyard or put a new place in the backyard, that can be where a lot of trees are. Do we anything like that addressed? If not, that's something I'm totally interested in. And then, would the ADUs be subject to? This may be more of a staff question, possibly all the impact fees for their impacts on capacity, like schools and water, sewer, parks, districts, whatever else we do our impact fees for, and the facilities capacity.
I can answer that, and I can also talk about the tree canopy. The Planning Commission didn't discuss that, but I checked. You had sent in some questions earlier today, and so I talked with Development Services about that. And for development, if you had an existing house and you wanted to do an ADU, you would address trees in the same way that you would on any single-family lot, which is there's an allowance for removal of a certain number of trees, 2 per year on a lot of 10,000 square feet or less, and then that gradually increases. But if you wanted to do an ADU, you still would be under those restrictions for tree removal. That's according to the permit reviewer and Development Services. Then the question about impact fees, there's a specific existing exemption for ADUs from impact fees, school, parks, and roads.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fowl.
Thank you for all the time you put into putting this together. I can see you did a lot of work, and I know you've been working on it for a number of months. So I'm going to draw some similar concerns, and we'll start with parking. There's a harsher imposing of parking than that of we have a standard for apartments. And I think in that light, this direction would either be discriminatory on parking. So I don't believe we need to impose yet another parking space on a property site. It's nice, but I think it's more than what we ask of apartment buildings building in our community now. And we look at view and height. and that has been brought up by some of our other council members and colleagues. We look all around ourselves. I used to have a 2,600 foot house, a square foot house, and I can tell you, if we looked out the front window, we saw our neighbor's home, and if we looked out the back window, we saw our back neighbor's yard and maybe their dining room table. That's the reality of the community we live in today. So I think we have to be a little bit more mindful and considerate of how we're talking about the view we have. Square footage, I think anything under 1,200 square foot would be appropriate. I think 1,000 square feet is kind of, that's a nice little place to start, but we also know that local apartment buildings don't have often 3-bedroom apartments to help service families, and that's a reduction in service of a community and also something we hear back from North Shore schools in past meetings. On the restriction of having an owner occupy one of the units, that too is a hardship. What if our owner is a veteran or is out serving in the military? That is a hardship. And what if there's a death in the family and this is an inheritance and you already have a property in a family? This is a hardship. So I propose that, leaning towards the idea of having a property maintenance person or having a property management agency to service the property is sufficient. For those ADUs already built, I think we should look more at grandfathering. And should they want to then expand or upgrade that ADU, why not then impose the standards to apply a code standard? And we do this with homes, we do this with businesses, this would be no different. And we do this with apartment buildings. And if a lot has, an acre and a half, 2 acres, and you have an ADU, what happens when your house, the main house, is possibly raising height, and you already have your one ADU flat? It sounds like with this standard, you could only have one separate ADU, but you could not also expand a height, build upward in height, and then have another ADU. I don't see a problem with that in this scenario if we have a large enough property. And I do know that in talking to residents and knocking on doors, that we have some seniors in our community have more than one mother-in-law apartment in their home. And if you have a 2-story home or you have a larger home and you have that division, I also don't see a problem with that. If that helps you stay in your home and retire in your home and be able to retire in the community you've come to love, that's fine by me. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Kane?
Yes, I really am impressed with what you've put together here. I think it's a very thoughtful move in the right direction for our community. I think it's important to find ways for our communities to help support, improve our affordable housing stock. I think that my understanding is that is a good part of the intention behind this. I also think it's great to provide the opportunity for property owners to have the ability to earn income and invest in their properties so that they can improve their property, improve value in the neighborhood. I think these are incredibly important things to allow. I lean towards the side of more autonomy on the part of property owners. I have concerns about writing in a mandate for property owners to live on the property. I think it feels unwieldy. My understanding is we haven't had any complaints of owners not living on site in ADUs in the past year, at least. I think it's a perceived problem rather than a real one, and I understand where that concern comes from. I just think it's something that is unwieldy, that would be very, unwieldy. I also look at it, I'm just going to give a hypothetical. I'm Melanie O'Kane. new Kenmore resident. I've got my house. I've got enough land. Oh, yeah, I'm going to put in an ADU. I put in an ADU. I make enough money here. I've done a good job. You know, me and my kids were living on site. But I'm making enough money that I'm like, wow, this is a good way for me to invest in my community and earn income. I want to buy another house. I'd like to do this again. I think that it's important, or say if I want to sell my home, that's the other side. Selling the home, mandate, you know, a person buying a home with an ADU, having to deal with the requirement that they would have to be on site is the other side. And I understand that this is maybe looking at what the concern is, but the idea to me is that a property owner should be able to determine what is right for their property. I echo what Karina and Councilmember File and Councilmember Deputy Mayor Herbig suggested related to property manager, and I can't recall exactly the language that Deputy Mayor Herbig spoke to, but I think it's an imposition to have the property owner live on site. And it's a lack of trust in renters is, I think, at the root of it. And that makes me uncomfortable. I've been a renter. I've lived in an ADU. I've taken great pride when I've lived in a city ADU. I liked living in that neighborhood. I liked the feeling of living in a home. And I think it's important to call attention to this. There is, I'm stretching for the word, but I'll just find a simple one. There's a classism between home ownership and renting. And I think this points to it. So I don't think it's intentional, and I want that to be understood when I say that. I don't think we're meaning to be writing this in this way. I recognize the concerns that are behind wanting homeowner occupancy here. I think the highest concern that I have is how would we manage it? It's a trust-based thing. So there's that. I also, when we are looking at increasing housing stock and opportunities for homeowners, I think that additional parking requirements limit that opportunity. And when we're looking at this, I'm wondering, who are we trying to provide housing for? People or cars? I promise you we have plenty of cars spaces all over Kenmore. What we need is more housing stock for our humans. In addition, adding parking stock goes against encouraging our residents to find other modes of transportation. At this time, we are really working towards reducing carbon emissions. Adding car spaces makes it easy for people to have cars, and I think we need to be mindful of that. And when we're looking, I think it was 7,500. I can't remember how many years for that population increase to take place. Our population is increasing. I think humans are who we are working to find housing for. This looks like it's only 148 houses. So when we're looking at that limited number, these I wasn't planning on using this word, but this management to this level of detail, who lives in the house and the parking, seem excessive. I really do like this work, and I really like the expansion that's been included in this document. So thank you.
Councilmember Cruz and Councilmember Marshall.
Follow up on a couple of your other questions. I would be in favor of the pre-approved plans. I would be in favor of the amnesty or grandfathering, whatever you called it. I wouldn't be a big fan of getting involved with financing at all. And then the idea of the living on site or requiring the homeowner, one potential compromise would be to say it's required when you first build it, but then no follow-up, no approval, nobody ever needs to know anything that happens after that. There's just too much stuff to manage and keep track of. I think it would just be a hassle. So say the homeowner can put in the ADU and then you're done. No more tracking necessary.
Yeah, Councilmember Marshall.
And I should mention that was brought up, I do have concerns about what could result in the worst-case scenario in absentee landlordism and places going to chaos when you have multiple amounts of people packed in lots, or a neighborhood that was originally designed for the densities that it was originally designed for. And that's, I have to at least point out or share my concern that to allow, and to use the language of infill, it's honest to state, okay, this is infill. That's not what our original suburban plats were designed for. We're not designed for density of this nature post-World War II. I have to express my I mean, I know you guys were given this task, so and you've done an excellent job doing it. I just have a fundamental concern with increasing our densities to this extent. I think I prefer at least having an option of the original suburban Kenmore as opposed to a more urban area within the suburban neighborhoods, while I think we can allow for low-income housing and density in our apartments, in our highly developed neighborhoods. I think that we ought to leave our suburban neighborhoods intact. I'll also draw your attention to the Great Recession. We've seen a great many houses and neighborhoods go into some chaos as they get rented out, and I think when you have a situation in which you're could have something that's not monitored, could have more density, you're just going to have more issues. So I think that this would be a compromise, of our identity as Kenmore, in addition to the other host of issues.
I appreciate your concerns that you've expressed, Joe. I do want to share a story. Actually, I think.
You actually have a queue going?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I seem to remember reading through here the first time, and again, this is a large document also, but I seem to remember there being something. There was an estimated number of possible new units that we thought would come online if we did these things. I don't remember it being an astronomical number. I don't remember the number being something that would drastically change the character of our neighborhoods. Lori, what was the number? I can't find it.
The number was between 140 and 150. Was the
citywide.
Estimate, citywide.
Okay, so that's a drop in the bucket. So I don't see any way that if that doesn't change the character of anything, spreading out 150 new units throughout the city. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Councilmember Herbig brought up what I wanted to bring up, so thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
I guess going back to my question, and again, I'm okay if nobody else sees it this way, does anybody see a problem with the 5,000 square foot lot with a triplex on it? Is there any interest in saying before you can get 3, you have to have 8,000? Because there's a lot of 9,600 square foot lots in the city. But 5,000 just seems, 4,500 seems really small for 3 dwelling units.
Yes.
I've been trying to track the number of sort of policy questions that you guys are raising this evening, and there are significant policy questions that you're raising. And Laurie's got 8 on her list, and I think if I have a different way of counting, but I think I would probably reach the same number. So I would probably suggest at this point that you might want to schedule a meeting in the future to kind of dive more into some of these policy questions, because some of the things that you are raising are sort of directly opposed or different to what the Planning Commission recommendation was. So I think in order to figure out what it is that you feel comfortable with as a council, we need to have more discussion. And if there are significant changes to the recommendation, it might also need a public hearing. So we can kind of, the questions that you've raised, which we would probably need more directional discussion on, would be parking, owner occupancy, height limits, lot size and number of ADUs, the basement allowance, the doors on the same side, the square footage of the ADU, and grandfathering for amnesty. Those are significant things that it sounds like you want to think about more, and I don't think we're going to be able to give you answers to those this evening. We can probably take a look at some of these issues and maybe come back to you with some options and then get direction from you. There is not really a time requirement that you need to make a decision sooner rather than later, so I see that it's getting late this evening, so that's my suggestion.
Can I make just a couple, just to maybe give you a little more insight into our thinking, and feel free to, Commissioner Lucis and Commissioner Baker. On the owner occupancy requirement that we unanimously agreed upon, I think that was our attempt to forestall any potential problems with neighborhood impacts. It certainly wasn't meant to be discriminatory. That's also why we included some exemptions, and the idea of perhaps a property manager or having it initially is probably consistent with sort of heading off problems before they started. So that's it on owner occupancy. On parking, and Lori and Debbie, maybe you can pitch in on this as well. My recollection is that we did include the additional parking space with the understanding that virtually all single-family homes have, 3 or 4 existing parking spaces. So in reality, there probably wouldn't be a need for a homeowner to build a new parking space. That's my recollection of that particular issue. So.
Right. What Chair Orenshaw is talking about is that in most new single-family residences, you have to provide 2 parking stalls. Those are usually in a garage, but there's another code requirement that requires a 20-foot parking area in front of the garage. It's the access way. So essentially you have 4 parking stalls, 2 in the garage and 2 on the pad. So the consideration was that even if you required additional stalls for the ADU, in many cases, perhaps most cases, you wouldn't end up having to construct additional spaces.
If I may, to add on to the parking thing as well, there would be, in almost all cases, enough parking already, so you wouldn't have to develop any new ones. But even considering without that, there are many streets now with bike lanes on them where you can't park on the street, so that would immediately eliminate that long stretch of housing. So they would have to provide some sort of space for those people, for the people in the ADU as well. Now, diving into some of the other questions as well, getting into the ADU discussion, we set up a couple of key values or goals on why we wanted to pursue ADUs and what benefits they would have. One of those being it's a great thing for families. If you have adult children who are trying to get on their feet, it's a great opportunity for them. Or if you have elderly parents who you'd like, or who would like to live on with you. Or later on, if you would like to have a potential caretaker live on the property for you as well. And these are some of the options. Another one is a new source of affordable housing and a source of income, because if, say, that your adult children do move out, it would be an opportunity to pursue the other 2 options. Now, for the owner occupancy, one of the key ideas and kind of issues we saw there was if we didn't have that owner occupancy, suddenly developers could come in and take over those lots and turn these single-family lots and start building duplexes or even triplexes, because you don't have that owner on there anymore. They could build these and then immediately make a single residence and add on, and make a duplex or even a triplex, and then it completely changes the neighborhood, and you could have large neighborhoods being overtaken by developers, and they're no longer single-family neighborhoods, and that's why we strongly encouraged this owner occupancy to be a point of contact for the city if there are to hold the occupants of the ADU accountable, and we could go to the owner, the main owner of the residence, and they could kind of be that person in the middle, and also to still preserve the idea of single family, because again, these are accessory dwelling units, they're not primary dwelling units. They're supposed to be attached onto the primary, well, not physically attached, but be supplemental to the primary dwelling unit, and not adding on, not being a separate entity in itself. It's supposed to help the owner of the property, as opposed to being another separate house.
And just to tag on to that, we did actually talk about the whole idea of our motive was not to create an opportunity for people to become wealthy from the property that they own, but rather to give them an opportunity to solve the whole concept of dwelling spaces, auxiliary dwelling spaces. So, I doubt a developer would come along and just start taking one house on the block and buying them, but you could do that, but I don't think that was our intention, was to open the door to that. I also don't think we were thinking of discouraging people who wanted to do this to their property and then not live there. So I like Milton's idea that you, Councilmember Curtis, that, at least to begin with, the person needs to own it and live there. And then how's the city going to manage that anyway, And also with the amnesty or clemency on the existing dwelling units, it really was more about the safety issue and code. So as a city, we have a responsibility to make sure our residents are safe. And if people build these dwelling units and they're unsafe, as we find out about them, I think there's something we can do about it. So that was what that need was.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I've heard the argument before in other jurisdictions. They're talking about ADUs around developers are going to come in and flip a bunch of houses. I haven't seen any documented cases of that actually happening in cities. I don't know. I mean, have you guys seen that? Was there any of that presented?
You could go to Portland and read before the recession what was going on down there.
I'd be curious to see that because I've heard people kind of use this, but I haven't actually seen it backed up particularly
I think we
well.
haven't had the financial opportunities to do that, but our economic arm is swinging a little bit. Interest rates have stayed low, and it could happen. So we're just trying to mitigate that.
Okay.
So the Affordable Housing Task Force that I co-chaired, one of the thoughts that we had requiring the owner to be present was for utilities. For instance, North Shore Utilities has their sewer and water hookups, that if the owner is living on the property, there is no hookup fee, which can amount to $10,000 or more. But the owner has to live there. So one of the issues that we have with affordable housing is all the fees and that are associated with it. And $10,000 tends to get pretty substantial. So anyway, that's just one potential fee. And I think you guys, assuming owners lived in the property, got rid of some of the impact fees. If they were really developing rental properties like duplexes and triplexes going up, would you really have the intent to waive impact fees that would help the city mitigate some of these things? So anyway, just something to think about. Anybody else? Councilmember Shreve.
Well, I just had a quick question about the owner occupancy. It is a little different. I mean, you can own a house here right now today and go away and rent it out. I mean, so it is a little odd. But I am curious what, other jurisdictions do around the ADUs and the owner occupancy. I would want to be consistent with our neighboring jurisdictions to avoid the potential that we're talking about.
Anything else? Deputy Mayor.
Just for the record, I could support what Councilmember Curtis proposed earlier, that owner needs to be occupied when they're originally building it. That could be a workable compromise.
Councilmember Curtis.
Last comment, I promise.
Well, that's okay.
I just want to thank you guys for being so thorough. The fact that we're having such a discussion says you brought up enough topics for us to have serious discussions about. So thank you.
That's our job. Thank you.
All right. So, Mrs. Mitt, do you have you got information, or you're coming back and we're going to do this over again to nail some of this down?
I think we're going to have to, because you've raised some significant questions and issues. So I think we'll have to provide a response and options back to you before we get direction. So we just need to figure out how much time we need to put that information together, and then we'll be back at a future council meeting.
All right, so you got all you need for tonight.
And then some, yep.
We got to give you something to do.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I so move. So move.
And I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda, West Sammamish River Bridge Project approval. Mr. Vincenti. Well, we got your chance now.
Jeez, I can do this in my sleep, and I think I just might. Okay. So, here to talk about the West Sammamish River Bridge budget. As a reminder, we advertised the project on October 14th. We split the project into two different phases for bidding, the base bid and the alternative bid. The base bid, of course, is bridge replacement, sidewalk on the west side of the road from 170th to 175th, including the bike path, sidewalk in front of Rhododendron Park on 68th, utility undergrounding, storm drainage, landscaping and irrigation, signals at 170th and 175th, and then there's also some habitat restoration that we're doing in Rhododendron Park and in the river underneath the bridge itself. We received bids on December 10th, and the low bid was about $6.52 million over our available budget. And that leaves us with a couple of options. Our first option would be to not fund the additional portion, and we would then have to reject the bids and then reevaluate what our next plan would be. That would probably result in, if we decided to adjust the scope and re-advertise, we'd be looking at the fall of 2021 before we could re-advertise this project, given our permitting issues and time we would need to evaluate the scope of the project. Our other option would be to approve issuing debt for this project so that we can award to the low bid contractor. That would give us two options: to either award or to fund for the base bid or fund for the base bid plus alternative bid. If we were to fund for the base bid, we would need to get an approval to issue debt in the amount of $6.52 million. For the base bid plus alternate, we would need $7.64 million. At this time, we are recommending that council approve issuing $6.52 million in debt so that we can make an award to the contractor for this project. I've also included into your packet a alternative recommendation in case council would like to approve issuing enough debt to award the base bid plus the alternate. So, any questions?
Councilmember Curtis?
So, in general, I think we need to proceed. Not building the bridge is not an option, and wasting 2 years is just going to cost us more. So I think we need to proceed. My question is around the alternate. Let's say if we borrow enough money that we can guarantee that we'll cover the base bid plus the alternate, the money isn't going to be all paid out for like up to 3 years or however long it'll take us to finish the project off. If, let's say we're progressing along, we've used up all of our that little reserve that you hope you don't need to use.
The contingency.
And the money, and that you've used up your contingency and the prices are still going up and it's just getting scary high. Could we talk to the contractor and said, can we kind of cancel that extra thing? or that's just not done?
So you're talking if we decided to award the base plus the alternate?
Right. Because it feels to me like the alternate, we're getting a really good price for the amount of work that's being done.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to try to shoot for that, but I guess I'm wondering, is there a back door or an out if it's just looking like it's a unexpecteds are coming up, our contingency's gone?
Yeah. So awarding the base bid plus the alternative provides a series of complications. When the contractor is given a full package, they will start the construction and they will optimize the work order that they do. And so within that alternative bid, which includes new sidewalk extending the queue jump lane to the bridge, if we were to award that and give them notice to proceed, they're going to start demoing that portion of the alternate along with the base. And so if we decided to delete that, we'd have to build back what we had them take out. So
That was my assumption, but I thought I'd ask.
Yes. You have more flexibility in awarding the base now and then talking to the contractor about adding the additive work at a later date, if you're concerned about use of the contingency and how much this project will eventually cost in the long run.
See, given the price that we're paying, I'm almost willing to go with that alternative because we've been planning it for a long time. You get the new bridge built, you still got the issue going northbound of not having a lane, a clear lane for right turn and straight through, and you're causing a jam. And because people who are turning left are still over in the curb lane, and this would give a clear lane for people to be in at the start of the bridge, or the end of the bridge, I guess, on the northbound side. So I would think for the price that we're getting, I mean, it's a very, very good price, that we would consider that additive portion.
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
One of the reasons why I'm recommending not awarding it, the alternate, is because we haven't opened bids for the walkways and waterways projects yet. We're going to go out to bid on the sidewalk projects for 1/8 and 68th in April, and who knows what those bids are going to be. And so I'm reluctant to tap into any reserves or additional capacity that we might have right now until we know what those bids are. And then in a couple of years from now, we're going to open the bids on the two waterfront projects. And so I'm just being conservative when it comes to that.
And I appreciate that, but $1 million now or $5 million later is...
And I'd also like to remind the council that we are going to be approaching the state legislature to try and move $6 million of our Connecting Washington money from West Sammamish, 522 West B into this project. We won't know that until April, and if that were to occur, then the debt issue would be reduced by $6 million. So there is that, and knowing this April would not be too late to ask the contractor about adding the additive to the contract.
So a fully funded portion of West will now be completely unfunded, right? When we're done with this?
It'll have $2 million left in it. Originally 12.
$12 million project, we'll have $2 million left. Deputy Mayor.
And I'll just really briefly repeat what I said during the retreat. I understand the needs for the additive piece. I just feel like it's outside the scope of the bridge project, which I frankly think we got out of scope when we got to the intersection down at 170th also. I think we need to be focused on the need, which is getting people across and rebuilding an important piece of infrastructure that's on its last legs. And we're already... $6 million, not even $6 million, getting a little punchy here because it's getting late. We're already over budget. Adding another $1 million to it doesn't entice me too much at this point. If we magically fell into more money, or if things somehow shook out in a way, I'd be interested in talking about it. But, I just feel like it's outside the scope of the project.
All right, so the question in front of us then, it's not actually in front of us yet, but the question we're trying to answer here is to approve increasing the West Sammamish River Bridge project budget by 6.52 by issuing debt and utilizing future REIT and transportation impact fees to pay off the debt. If there are no more questions, is there a motion to that effect?
Just point of clarification, is that just the base?
Yes.
Okay. I'll approve that motion.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All right. Any further discussion on this issue? Councilmember Curtis.
So I would like just to keep that option open, that if we do get the money transferred from the other fund, that then we could look at adding the alternative in April.
Yes, I agree completely. The other head's nodding. Councilmember.
I just have a question about other funding possibilities and sources. Is there any possibility of seeking out any other federal funding for bridge construction projects?
So currently, the project is funded by the Bridge Replacement Grant, and they only will allow $12 million per project, and we've been awarded $12 million on that. We also have funding from the Puget Sound Regional Council. We were awarded, I believe, $1.6 million in funding. Once you get one federal fund from PSRC, you cannot get another. And so we can't go after them for any additional funding. Of course, we have TIB funding, Transportation Improvement Board, of $6.9 million, and they will not give us any more money for this project. We happen to be the largest award they've done, they say, so they won't give us any more of that. The Connecting Washington is our best bet because there's no limit on how much money they will give us. It's whatever we can convince them. So that's our biggest option. I don't know of any other federal dollars that would work with this that we would actually be competitive for.
Thank you.
Your Honor, if I can ask Mr. Vicente a question. Where are we at on the Coast Guard permit?
Yes, I was going to ask that myself.
So the Coast Guard permit, from my understanding, is still with their legal review. And once it goes through their legal review, they will have their director, I believe, sign that permit.
Okay, so the hope is we get that permit this week, because our intent is to come to you next Tuesday night for bid award.
Mm-hmm.
But we're definitely not going to bring it forward to you for bid award if we don't have the final permit. So let's cross our fingers. Mayor Baker is going to call Congresswoman Delbenny's office tomorrow to see if she can move the needle a little bit. So let's hope we can get that permit in the next few days. Otherwise, we won't be able to award the bid.
We will be able to award it on Tuesday.
That's right.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to approve increasing the West Sammamish River Bridge project budget by $6.52 million by issuing debt and utilizing future REIT and transportation impact fees to pay off the debt. Any further questions, discussion? Clerk, please take the roll.
Oh, there was a hand. No. Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane?
Yes.
Councilmember Shrebnick?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember File?
Yes.
Passed.
All right. Next item on the agenda is review and appoint council committees. So we have a few committees that we appoint to. One is the East Side Transportation Partnership, and it meets on the second Friday of the month from 7:30 to 9:30 at Bellevue School District office, but it also meets other places. The Seashore Transportation Forum, and that one is on the first Friday of the month from 7:30 to 9:30, and it meets consistently at Shoreline City Hall. The other committee is the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee. And then we have the WIRA 8, the Water Resource Inventory Area Number 8, Salmon Recovery Council. We also have, and that one meets from 3:30 to 5:30. every other month on the third Thursday. And the North Shore Parks and Recreation Board, we have one position there, and that meets 4 times a year at the North Shore Senior Center. And then we have the North Shore Performing Arts Advisory Board, which we don't really have any information on. About that. All right, so let's start with ETP. That one has got 2 voting positions and an alternate vacant. And Deputy Mayor Herbig and Councilmember Curtis currently serve on that. And I guess it's fair to ask, do you guys want to continue serving on that?
Yeah, I'd like
History
one.
and standing on that, so.
But I think
we
in-
do need a vacant. We've got a vacant alternate position, if somebody wants that. I serve on the board also, but I serve as the Sound Transit representative, so I can't serve as Kenmore.
I could probably be the vacant for the alternate.
Okay, and that's fine, and that would meet second Friday of the month, 7:30 to 9:30. Over in Bellevue, okay. Seashore Transportation Forum, there's 2 voting positions on that, and currently I serve and Councilmember Herbig serves, and we got a vacant alternate position, and I really, with everything I'm doing with Sound Transit and the other committees on, I will not be able to attend, and I haven't attended Seashore for some time, quite honestly. So, Councilmember Herbig, do you want to continue with that one?
Even though it's 7:30 in the morning, sure.
Well, it's in your area.
There's donuts and coffee.
Yeah, and you can hear things twice.
Yes. Gotten used to that.
You get a preview by hearing it at Seashore for ETP. So anybody else want to serve on that committee as a full voting member or an alternate? We have both of those open. Okay, nobody does, so those positions will remain open. SCA PIC, the Public Issues Committee, I have served on that for some time, and I want to continue that. And Councilmember Shrebnick is the alternate. Is that something you want to continue to be? Okay, so we have an alternate position. That's on Wednesday nights, and it's the second Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m.
I'd be willing to step in on that. I'd be willing to be the alternate.
Fine, and you, well, yes, if there are no objections, Karina can be alternate on that. WIRA 8, Resource Inventory Area, number 8. Councilmember Marshall was the voting position, and I was the alternate. Because I'm on the Board of Health, that really conflicts with me, and Councilmember Marshall gave that up. So WIRA 8 is open.
I'd like that position.
So then, if there are no objections with this, Councilmember O'Kane will get that. Is there anybody who would like to be alternate? That position will remain open then. All right, North Shore Park and Recreation Board. Councilmember Marshall, you want to continue on that one? All right, and then we have another position that's vacant. Anybody want to do that? That one meets from 3 to 5 p.m. every other month.
Just approved, big budget, big decision to make, a lot of fun.
There you go. Was I reading Raya? Oh, never mind. No, I wasn't. Joe Marshall. Oh, on the meeting times, 3 times a year. North Shore Senior Center, 3 or 4 times a year. But that's Joe Marshall that has that, and there is a vacant position. So anybody want to do that vacant position?
That's got a hand.
I'd be happy to take the vacant position.
Okay, so we'll give, there's no objections. Councilmember File, North Shore Park and Recreation Board. All right, North Shore Performing Arts Advisory Board. That's currently held by Councilmember Shrebnick. Do you want to keep that one?
I don't, and I'm giving up these positions because I'm on another SCA board and the census work is a tremendous amount of work this coming year. So that's, if people are wondering.
So anybody want to serve as Kenmore's representative to the North Shore Performing Arts Advisory Board? Do you guys meet very often?
Yeah, well, I mean, the design is already done. So, I mean, it's not a ton of, I mean, there hasn't been a meeting in many, many months at this point. So I'm not clear that there's much advising left to be done.
Okay.
So,
Does anybody want to take on the position representing Kenmore? Councilmember O'Kane?
I'll go ahead and take that.
All right, so Councilmember O'Kane will do the North Shore Performing Arts Advisory Board. So let's make sure we've got this right. We have got ETP with Deputy Mayor Herbig, Councilmember Curtis, and Councilmember O'Kane. We have got Seashore Transportation Forum with Deputy Mayor Herbig. Two other positions, one voting and one alternate remain vacant. Councilmember O'Kane.
What were the meeting times for that again?
7:30 to 9:30 the first Friday. ETP is the second Friday, same time.
Realistically, it's more like 7:30 to 9. They try to get done by 9,
Yeah, I
but
know, yeah, that one does.
yeah.
Could this be open for touching base on in another meeting? I'd give it consideration.
Yeah, now, just let me tell you, what you hear the first Friday at Seashore, you will hear again at ETP on the second Friday. So it's basically a repeat. Okay, so possibly Councilmember O'Kane will do the alternate, the voting position at Seashore. So we will have to get back to the clerk on that one. SCA Public Issues Committee, I am the voting member, and Councilmember File will be the alternate. VIII will be Councilmember O'Kane, and the alternate position is open. North Shore Park and Recreation Board will be Councilmember O'Kane? No. Councilmember Marshall, the alternate position will be Councilmember File. And North Shore Performing Arts Advisory Board will be Councilmember O'Kane. I think that covers everything, right? Great. Next item on the agenda. Open government training for council members. State law requires elected officials to complete training in the Open Public Meetings Act, Public Records Act, and Records Retention within 90 days of their taking oath of office. And there are some links to be followed in the agenda packet. So I would strongly suggest you do it. And that includes me and Councilmember Curtis, because we need to redo those every 4 years, refresher training.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes?
Also, the refresher course is every 4 years for elected officials, but also the links were to allow the council to get the training at their own leisure and time commitments. But there's a training certificate at the last bullet point.
Right.
And I always recommend that you get that certificate and then provide it to the city clerk, who will then just drop it into a file, and then we'll always know that the training's been done.
Right.
And then there is that 90-day time period requirement for the newly elected council
Then
members.
I believe those same requirements may be, or part of them, for people serving on committees like ETP and, I know I have to do it for some of the committees I'm on. Do you have to? I don't remember that. I don't remember either, so. All right. So.
Question.
Yes.
So which is more important, the newly elected or the 4 years? Because I think I just did mine like 2 years ago. Would you be able to find the date of when I did mine? I turned in my certificate.
Yeah.
And just to be glib, they're equally important.
Yeah, they are
But
equally important.
it's 4-year refresher, and so you have at least 2 more years if you've already taken the training.
I do have 2 more years.
Correct.
Well, we have to check the date, but yes.
Correct, it's the newly elected have 90 days, and then after that, it's a 4-year interval. So every 4 years. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
All right. Any questions on that?
Your Honor.
Wait, I just did that for you.
Yes.
You did. I appreciate it.
You gave the staff report. Thank you. Good job.
No, I'm turning the staff report over to you.
Yeah, I got a couple more things.
Sure.
First of all, it's good to be back. We had a big, long recess, and now it's good to be back here at the council meeting. So just remember, your next council meeting is actually on a Tuesday, because your code says that whenever there is a regular meeting that happens to fall on a Monday, then that's a holiday, then it's automatically scheduled for the following day, the Tuesday. So that's Tuesday the 21st. We plan on doing a couple things at that meeting. Chief among which is the Bridge Award, awarding the bid to the lowest responsible bidder. And then on the 27th, we're going to have council photos. We're going to start individual pictures at 6:15, knowing Councilmember Herbig will get there right about 7, and he'll have his individual photo, and then the group photo right after that. So the council meeting will probably start 7:30? 7:30? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also we have some trainings scheduled for you, a couple of trainings. One is our insurance carrier, WCIA, is going to come and do some risk management training for the City Council on February 10th. That's actually shaping up to be a pretty busy night, because we have a couple other things going on that night, including the school board joint meeting. And then we also have some special parliamentary training for you on April 6th. That'd be a special meeting. Anne McFarland and her Jurassic Parliament training model will be back. That's something we always look forward to. Last but not least, our snow plows are out and about right now. Our maintenance workers are in shifts working through the night to do what they can to keep our roads safe and drivable. We've been sending out a lot of posts and a lot of information about it. But we're really encouraging people, especially as the temperature dips into the 20s tonight and tomorrow, that we're encouraging people to stay off the road as much as they can. But if you get a chance, thank our maintenance workers, because they're having to pull some late hours and some long shifts here. So that's all I have.
All right. Councilmember comments, reports, concerns, initiatives. These basically deal with committees that we're on and what happened that's of general interest to the council and to the city. So let's start down with Councilmember O'Kane.
I don't have any reports, but I do want to say it's really nice to be on the dais here with this amazing group of people ready to represent the city of Kenmore. So, thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Congratulations to our continuing and new council members. It's going to be a great year.
Councilmember Curtis.
I enjoyed the retreat. I think we accomplished a lot, and I think we'll have some clear direction going forward.
Councilmember Councilmember Shrebnick.
Welcome to our new council members, and thank you, staff and council members, for a great retreat.
Councilmember File.
I want to thank you for being most welcoming to our new council members, myself and Melanie O'Kane. And the retreat was like a fire hose experience at first time. It really wore me out, but good work, and I'm excited to be happy and proud to be serving with a great cohesive team.
Deputy Mayor.
I mean, everybody already said what I was going to say. This is an exciting start to the year, and we got a lot of work done last weekend, which is great, and I look forward to seeing how everything goes over the next year, with year and 2 years with you guys.
So I need to call two different things to everybody's attention. On Wednesday night, there's a meeting at SeaTac City Hall that deals with boards and commissions. And it's basically a orientation session for committee and board appointments. Anybody is really welcome to attend that if they want to. It's down at SeaTac City Hall. I believe it starts at 6 o'clock. There will be a lot of information given out there. Also, for newly electeds, there is a meeting at PSRC headquarters down on 1100 Western Avenue on newly electeds and what roles and responsibilities are. And it's followed by a social gathering at Ivar's Acres of Clams that the tabs are being picked up by a couple of Sound City sponsors. And you are definitely invited to attend that. So, if there's no further business to come before us,